as we go along. If you want to make a comment, there's a few times when you can make one. First is in public comment, where you can comment on anything you want that isn't on the agenda, and which on the agenda tonight is aging, fire-wise communities, and some history and some MCC business. Also, for each of those items on the agenda, there will be a time for public to make comment on each of those. So just raise your hand. If you want to put comments in the chat, you can also do that. Len, would you call the roll, please?
Sure, we were going to ask Dan to do that?
Well, we haven't approved that yet.
Okay. Joe?
Here.
Dan?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Claire?
Here.
Michelle?
Here.
Greg?
Here.
And I'm here. Everyone's present.
Thank you. The next item is reports from government agencies, and we'll start with Harvey Rohrbeck from Half Moon Bay, please.
Okay.
Oh, no, we won't. I'm so sorry, Harvey. I always want to make
whatever. Well.
I know that Lena is number one.
Yes.
Yeah, number one.
Thank you. That feeds my ego. Very good. I appreciate that. Well, I miss you all. Very nice to see you all today. I have a lot of things I want to touch on, so I'm going to keep them really brief. And if you have questions, feel free to ask afterwards or email or call me and I can expound upon it. But my first update is about COVID. So currently the BA.5 variant is dominant in San Mateo County and California. We're seeing as these variants outcompete their predecessors, they are much more transmissible and they're much better at evading the immune response that we get from both vaccines and prior infections. So that's kind of prolonging this higher level of community transmission we're seeing, which, speaking of that, as of the very end of June, we are now in the CDC's high tier, which is basically determined by both the viral transmission that we're having, which is substantial, as well as the increase in COVID-19 related hospitalizations. We're seeing this in San Francisco County as well. The number of patients as of the beginning of this week was 42 that were hospitalized in San Mateo County. We've been seeing numbers between 30 and 50 since the end of May. So definitely much higher than the beginning of the year, which was, I think, beginning of May was around 20. And fortunately, even though that's really high, that is nowhere near a capacity concern for our hospitals. So that's what we're really worried about. That's what we're monitoring. And also, just a side note, part of the reason these numbers might be high, I mean, absolutely a concern, but we are also seeing a decrease in people going to get testing at facilities, which is where we get these numbers. So more people who are testing at facilities are going because they're experiencing symptoms, and more people are testing at home, and we just don't get those numbers. But still definitely wear high quality masks in indoor settings, continue with all precautions. And really the key message that we want to get out is it's super important to stay up to date with your boosters, especially for those age 50 and up. To minimize the severe impacts of getting COVID. We're still seeing transmission, but the impact is really significant. The change is significant if you get vaccinated. My next update, I'm gonna just really briefly say, we had told the MCC that there was a cannabis ordinance update for the cultivation. That was passed yesterday. I have in my notes what basically that means, but if anyone has questions, happy to talk to them about that. And also highlighting for the future, Connect the Coast side is going to the Board of Supervisors on the 26th. So that'll be going to the board then if people want to go, have public comment, hear the presentation. I also want to say something that I'm working on at the request of the supervisor is providing some funding to the RCD, both for just general chipping and general fire resiliency, but also with the goal of having a specific project developed in El Granada in response to the scoping project. When I say specific, I don't know which one that is, but giving that to the RCD with the hopes of being able to develop a project. Two other funding items we have, $50,000 to Abundant Grace for their full circle food justice program and farm apprenticeship programs. And then $30,000 for a purchase of a new vehicle for the CARES program in Half Moon Bay, which, Harvey, I got to go first. I don't want to take any of your glory, but there will be an expansion of that program soon. So that'll be in helping support that expansion towards the Midcoast. And lastly, I've heard some questions about SMC alerts. I think I've said this in a couple of my previous updates. There's a big update going with SMC alerts. And I think the most significant portion of that is that it's really going to be limited to just emergency situations and not minor traffic incidences. I did find a good app if people want an app with traffic incidences, and I'm happy to share that, unrelated to the county. And the the Department of Emergency Management is working on some major evacuation planning. They're hiring a couple new people, someone who's a GIS expert, as well as Chief Cosgrave is now working in the Department of Emergency Management. So I'm really hoping I have some updates on that really soon. Sorry, I lied. Also, lastly, working on a minimum wage increase, which I'm happy to talk about if anyone's curious, and the creation of a county farm worker commission. And now I'm done. Sorry, thank you so much.
You got a lot in a short time.
I was trying.
Anybody have questions for Lena? Yes, Greg.
What's the status of the county wildfire coordinator? I'd heard that Brian Kelly was leaving. I wanted to know how that was going to be staffed, when.
Right. That is something I'm also really curious about. We had this steering committee that's made up of Supervisor Horsley, Supervisor Canepa, and then CAL FIRE and all those members today. And Brian is still working as of today. I don't actually know when his last day is, but I'm going to be working really closely with Don Matei to know. I think they're already actively looking for new people. I think they've already had 3 candidates lined up. So it's looking like we might not even have a break between having people, but I'll definitely keep you all updated.
Okay. Michelle.
Yeah, I was just wanted to ask about the SMC alerts, and you said it would be limited to only emergency situations, but if there was a non-emergency situation that closed the road for some reason, we'd hope that that would also be sent out as an alert.
Yeah. I'll have to ask the person in charge of that. I'm hesitant to say it would be as of the plan right now, but I understand why you'd want it to be. So let me make sure that's the case.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I would love to have some co-side input on whatever happens there as a new person comes on board.
Absolutely.
Sid?
Sid, you're still on mute if you're talking.
I know, I'm on my phone. I'm usually calling in from my computer. Well, I just have to say that's BS about calling a minor traffic accident. A road closure to our area on the coast side needs to be notified, period. And I'm sorry, but they had a fatality on 92. There was not one SMC alert. And I brought this up at the supervisors meeting on Tuesday. I don't know if you heard me, but when they had the Edgewood fire, both of my friends that live off Jefferson, one in unincorporated Woodside and one in the unincorporated Emerald Hills area of Redwood City, neither of them got an SMC alert because they're not signed up. And that's an evacuation notice, which is tied in with Zone Haven. So until the county raises awareness that they need to be signed up for SMC alert to get evacuation warnings, notices and messages, then the only way my friend in Woodside found out was because the sheriff actually drove down his driveway. That's totally inefficient. It's nice that they're going door to door, but my friends who are 90 years old and lived on the other side, which is Emerald Hills, they had no power, so they had no way of knowing, and they're not signed up for SMC alert. But for people over here on the coast, and they use 92 or Highway 1, we need to know when the road is closed, period. Not a minor traffic incident that might only close it for an hour. But even then, we don't have those variable message signs that they should have on 92 to let all the people coming and going know, oh, don't wait till you turn around at Skyline. Turn around, go back out and go up Highway 1 instead. But we don't have that. So they've got to give us SMC alert.
Claire, is it okay if I try and answer a couple parts of that?
Sure. I know that we're working on putting this on the agenda when the staffing gets straightened out.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
definitely. And for the SMC alerts, I think I probably can get you someone whenever you'd like. I think I know someone who's working on that actively. A couple things, Sid, I will say definitely we do want to keep pushing out for people to sign up for SMC alerts. When this change happens, everyone who's already signed up will be moved over. So adding people as of right now is always great, and I would like to do that more. Something that we were talking about today related to evacuations is similar to how on the coast there's the tsunami warnings. For people like your friends in Emerald Hills, we're thinking about trying to do something similar to that, because it is always an issue with evacuations when power goes out. So police going door to door is a normal policy, but as you said, not very efficient. So we're trying to think of creative ways to handle that for high-risk fire areas. Definitely a concern. And I don't think I addressed all the things you said, but all.
Well, okay, my point was Zone Haven only works if you're signed up for SMC alert. So neither one of them were signed up. So of course they didn't get their notices. Just happened that I saw on Zone Haven, both of their addresses were in the zones for evacuation. So I called them to make sure they were all right. So maybe that's the way, just word of mouth or through next door. But to me, if the county has a system for alerting people, they need to publicize that you have to sign up for it.
And we do put billboards up too, and radio ads as well.
But if they're sitting at home, they're years old, their TV is not on because of the power. I'm just saying.
To sign up, I'm sorry, to sign up for Zone Haven, I meant.
Oh, you can't sign up for Zone Haven. You have to sign up for SMC alert.
Yeah.
I already tried to sign them up, but that's it. Okay, thanks. And I'm glad, Claire, that you are planning to have an update on it for us, because there's so many times that there's road closures over here and we don't get notified.
Yeah, we're planning to have something on that. Dan?
Oh, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
Yes, Lena, thank you for your report. Just follow up, I brought it up a number of weeks back about the eucalyptus trees that Caltrans cut along Highway 1, some at Frenchman's Creek and some at Medio. And it looks like someone may have tried to spray, like a portion of the big one at Medio, Frenchman's Creek. There's several at Frenchman's Creek and at least a couple at Medio Creek. They're shooting to the stars. The thing is, everybody should know or already knows that, that when you cut a tree, the existing root system it doesn't have to wait to grow a root system. It's already there. So what's remaining will grow fast. And it's the longer, they take to give it attention, the more of a job it is. And, as the tree expert, said, as more than a year ago, it might be one of the best ways to just remove the foliage and cover it up with some kind of light, light deprivation material, so that it doesn't get the light for the leaves to flourish. But yeah, they're growing fast. They're growing back fast, and so. I'm guessing that you maybe went through the chain and got Caltrans to do something, but if you take a look at it yourself, they need to do, I think that they need to do something more, and sooner the better.
Okay. Barbara Dye needs to go and needs to make a report. So I'm going to come back to the two of you that have your hands up for Lena, if you don't mind, and turn it over to Barbara.
Thank you, Claire. I'll be quick. First, I want to thank Lena for helping with a little matter. The fourth grade students at El Granada Elementary have been part of the Coastside Land Trust Junior Land Stewards Program, and they cleared some land, they mulched it, then they grew plants and planted native plants, and they are right next to the site of the multimodal trail. And we were concerned that some of the equipment might run them over and so forth. And I had tried to talk to someone there, but then they did some mulching. They cut down a big tree, and the mulch had come over a corner of the garden. So we were very concerned that there were going to be impacts. And I got in touch with Lena, who got in touch with the people there. And now there's a great orange fence around them, and the native plant gardens for the fourth graders are saved. So I think that's just great news. Thank you, Lena. And second, I wanted to invite everyone to the opening of the pump track on Saturday in Quarry Park. It will be from 10 to 2. It's very exciting. It's a cooperative project between GCSD and the county. I wanted also to make a very strong point, which is that we need to be aware of the impacts on the people around the park of this event and future use of that. So for this event, there's going to be parking at the elementary school. And so we're asking people to please go to the elementary school, park there, and come join us at Quarry Park. There's going to be some booths, there's going to be food, there's going to be demonstrations. It's going to be a great time. So join us there, and I look forward to seeing you. Oh, and GCSD will have a booth, and we will have copies of the latest plan for the park. And we're not going to be taking public input there, but we are planning in a month or two to start having some community input sessions on, for example, choosing playground equipment, a number of other issues about the park. And we're going to be asking people to sign up so they can be notified of those sessions that we're going to be out there looking for some more community feedback, because we have some exciting things coming up. So thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, back to Lena.
Yes, so you said in terms of the RCD scoping project was presented to the community and declared finished. So what exactly are you asking them to do? Is Supervisor Horsley asking them to do?
Yeah, so the number, it hasn't gone to the board. So that's why I'm being a little bit hesitant, but the number that I'm drafting up for the RCD is 350,000, which encompasses both the chipping program, running it and administering it, and also project development. And what we're talking about is that part of that funding for project development is expected to go to developing a project in El Granada. So we're kind of putting it on the RCD to work on that, but that's one of the items that we want to highlight with that funding.
So when you say El Granada, it's confusing in the sense that El Granada is generally actually the community. And Quarry Park is a separate entity, and the report was only on Quarry Park in terms of the 18 priorities.
Right. If that's the scope, then sure, not the urban part of the community, not the medians. I mean, just because that's not. I mean, that wasn't recommended in the scoping project.
If I can comment just a little bit, we do not put the scoping project on the agenda tonight because it came out fairly late, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to process that before it goes on the agenda. We will have an item relating to it on the next meeting's agenda. We do have tonight, so stay tuned for it, something that I think is a companion piece to the scoping project, which is looking more at the built environment and fire-wise communities. So we'll be doing that later on this evening, and then we'll get to the scoping project next meeting. Crystalline.
First off, I just want to say, Lena, thank you so much for your report. I sure hope we get to keep you after November, and just appreciate you more more than words. And you mentioned that there's a project going on about minimum wage, and I just wanted to see if the chamber could be involved in the discussions with that so that we can prep the businesses for whatever is going to be coming out.
Thank you, Chrislyn. Absolutely. Definitely. I'm currently working on an outreach program, and y'all are like number 3 on that list. We're definitely going to be working with you closely on that if you'd let us.
Yes, absolutely would love that. Any help that we can provide is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. No, Harvey. Sorry to keep
Thanks, Claire. No problem. I attended Chief Cosgrave's. Didn't call it the retirement party. They called it the unpinning party. But in any event, Chief Cosgrave, who I imagine a lot of you know is an excellent emergency preparedness expert who's taught a lot of us on CERT and has worked with the county, is about to work with the county. And stay tuned. I think you're going to see a lot more of him on the coast. And I think that's really a great achievement that the coast is going to be greatly improved by his emergency services. Last night, the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission reviewed the variable message sign that Caltrans had proposed for the south end of town on Highway 1. And there were only 3 planning commissioners there, so they didn't want to make a final decision. But they have recommended that at the August 23rd meeting, the coastal development permit for that sign will be denied with a set of reasons. That may be of interest to people living on the coast who will also be involved with potential variable message signs on Highway 1. Lastly, I know that Sandy is going to be talking about aging on the coast side, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but I just wanted to mention that I'm on the age-friendly task force for the coastside Half Moon Bay, in particular the medical services task force. And if all goes well, and there's no guarantee it will, we're going to be considering both getting traffic or transportation services available, not just for aging people, but for the entire coast side, as well as, and this is a long shot, but it's worth pursuing, a urgent care clinic on the coast side, something that we've wanted to have for the last 20 years and really need. So stay tuned for that. Just cross your fingers that we can actually achieve these medical services. That's my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I guess that's Sid. There's a disembodied hand up.
Yeah, it's me. The menu disappears when I'm not tapping it, so I found the mute button, or unmute. Harvey, yesterday it was only on the consent agenda, but it sounds like the Sheriff's Department is going to start leasing a home or an office or some space at 270 Capistrano, which I think is Harbor Village. Do you know, are they planning to leave Half Moon Bay or leave Moss Beach, or are they planning to just have a third space in between the other 2 stations? Do you know? You heard anything?
I know that they're not planning to leave the substation that we just spent a lot of money fixing on Kelly Avenue. I'm not aware of any other plans outside the city limits.
Okay. I just wondered if you heard anything. Does Lena know? Or is she gone? Oh, wow.
I'm here. I don't know. I can find out.
That's all right. Thank you.
I dropped the answer in the chat. It's the Sheriff Activities League program. It's opposite from Lamas.
Thank you so much. Michelle, I should have known you would know. Bye.
Any other government here tonight? If not, we'll move on to public comment. As I say, anybody can speak up for up to 3 minutes on something that's not on the agenda. I don't see any public comment. I have one quick announcement, which is important, which is that the elections office will be open for people to file for candidacy for the November election starting the 18th of July and open for about a month. So anybody who is interested in running, you need to go over there in person and bring a check and bring your statement they put on the ballot, and they'll take care of you. Dave?
Yeah, just a really brief report on the Medio Creek Bridge Replacement Project. They are in the process, they've removed the decking on the old bridge, and they've in the process of removing the railings today. The oceanside railing has already been removed. They were working on the inland side when I was there at 6 o'clock tonight. So I assume that by tomorrow, the old bridge structure will be removed. If not, then probably by Friday.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There are 4 items on the consent agenda. They are the minutes for April 27th, May 11th, and June 8th. There's the renewal of our resolution to authorize remote meetings. There is the recognition of Independent Retailers Day or month, and the 2021 to 22 Treasurer's Report for the MCC. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Glenn, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Who was the second?
Jill was the second.
Thank you. Jill?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Passes 7-0.
Thank you. We move on to the regular agenda. The first guest tonight is Sandy Winter, who is the Executive Director of Senior Coastsiders, and she's going to be giving us an update on aging on the coast. So Sandy, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to come to this meeting. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm actually a resident of Moss Beach, so I think I'm technically in the right group here, which is good to know.
You're our constituent.
Very good. So I'm going to share my screen. It might take me a few minutes just to get everything set up. Okay, so can you see my screen presentation for the Midcoast Community Council?
Yes.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. So I'm going to start off with just talking about why the issue of aging is important. So we know that currently 10,000 Americans turn 65 every day. That is a huge number. And I've actually heard that it's closer to 12,000. There are 45 million Americans who are age 65 and older. And by 2030, there's the expectation that there'll be 73 million Americans age 65. So at that point, there'll be 1 in 5 Americans who are 65 and older. So a huge and growing proportion of the population. And something that I think is really interesting is the second fact that I have on the slide, that demographers predict that as many as half of the children who are born in the developed world since 2000 will reach the age of of 100 and beyond. So not only are there more older adults, but the older adults that we have are going to live much longer because they are healthier, they are better educated, they live in a more connected world with more technological advances. So just something to think about, that there are more and more older adults in the world. And so for the first time in US history, by 2034, it's predicted that older adults will actually outnumber the children who are aged 18 and under. So when we think about the allocation of resources and the way we build our environments and the way we educate people, that's something really important to consider, that there's going to be more older adults in the world than there are children under 18. So this is a very big picture, but of course, we really care about what's happening in San Mateo County. So about 17.5% of the total population in San Mateo County are age 65 and older. And we can see that 32% of those are all aged over 75. So this is indicating, again, what I was saying earlier, that people are living longer lives. The other thing that is a global demographic trend, and particular to the US and also to San Mateo County, is that older adults are increasingly more racially and ethnically diverse. So when we think about that in terms of service provision, because I'm a service provider, we need to make sure that we have the individuals who speak the languages, that we prepare the food, that we celebrate the traditions and the cultures that represent the racially and ethnically diverse population in which we live. So on the coast, you'll see that there's slightly more older adults. People love to come here to retire. So about 22.3% of people in Half Moon Bay are age 65 and older. And it's difficult to get statistics for the coast side as a whole, but the El Granada district, it's about 18.6% of the people are age 65 and older. So definitely a population to take into consideration. So the next, I have some San Mateo County age pyramids, and this is just showing that in the next 10 years, these are called age pyramids because originally there were a lot of children and then fewer adults at the top. And what's happening over time is that the number of children is decreasing and the number of older adults is increasing. And so that's why we get these funny, more sort of columnar-shaped population pyramids. And it's just showing that, again, there's going to be more and more people in that advanced older adult population. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Senior Co-Siders. So I'm the executive director at Senior Co-Siders. I've been here since about 2019. Before that, I did my postdoc at Stanford in a lab that focused particularly on older adults, which is where my interest and enthusiasm for meeting the needs of older adults arose. So I'm hopefully going to play a video, couple of minutes, that tells you a little bit about the services that Senior Co-Siders does. So let me see if I can make this work. Let me see, there should be a little play button, and of course it's not here. So what I might do is just stop sharing, and then I'll pull the video up and then start to share again. So hold on a moment. The joys of technology. Okay, I'm going to start sharing it and then share my screen. So hold on a moment. so that's just an idea of the services and programs that we offer. It's quite an extensive array. So let me just get back to my PowerPoint presentation here. So I just need to share my screen. Okay, so we watched the video that explained what we do, and the model that I have been thinking about our services is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that, but basically it's this idea that, again, a pyramid, that there are some foundational needs that everybody needs to survive. So we need physiological needs, we need to be safe. So for us, those are things like preparing meals. We have a commercial kitchen, we do home delivery meals, and we have meals, congregate dining. We also provide meals for the Coastside Adult Day Health Center. Our kitchen is used by Table of Plenty and No Strings Attached to provide additional meals. So we're turning out just ourselves, not our partners, over 4,000 meals every month that we provide to seniors in our community. We also do things like make sure that people have their medications, pick up their meds from the pick up their groceries and things like that. And then in terms of the safety, that would be our minor home repair program. So we go into people's homes, we make sure that they have grab bars by any stairs, that they have appropriate bathroom facilities, grab bars, proper toilets, safety alarms, fire safety alarms, that kind of thing. So we provide those physiological and safety needs for any individual, but particularly for low-income adults, people who can't afford to do these things themselves. But our services are age dependent. They are not income dependent. And so we also provide services for any older adult in the community who wants to take part. And the way I think of those is in these higher level needs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the psychological needs for self-fulfillment. And those would be things like the fact that we provide an opportunity for people to come, to interact in a safe and welcoming environment, all of the volunteer programs that we do. So we have a staff of about 12, and all of the work that we do is really done through the coordination of our volunteers. And that is a two-way street, because not only do we benefit greatly from the volunteer services, but the volunteers also derive a tremendous sense of purpose and meaning from the work that they do with our seniors. And then the highest level of needs is this idea of self-fulfillment needs, so self-actualization. And those would be things like our classes and activities and the special events that we provide for creativity and lifelong learning. And the way I think about our classes is we have a lot of physical activity classes. We have Pilates and Zumba and line dancing and things like that. And those cater for people with different abilities. So we have chair-based exercises. We have Parkinson's exercises for people who are struggling with Parkinson's. So we have a whole range of different kinds of physical activity classes that we do. But then we also have classes that allow people to express themselves creatively. So we have a wonderful writing group, we have a card making class, we have craft groups, we have painting groups, we have book reviews, all that kind of thing. And then a lot of these classes too allow the opportunity for social engagement and connectedness. And I think we realized during COVID how terribly important that is for everybody, but also particularly for older adults. So we try to meet our participants' needs. Our services are age dependent, not income dependent. And this is really an idea of the way we structure the opportunities that we have. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about our particular participants. So I think reflecting our demographic here is they're primarily white or Latino or Asian, mostly female. And then you can see the age range is between the highest number of people that we have is between the 70 and 79 range, and then 80 to 89. And we have people who are also in that 100-year age group. So you can imagine that when we're thinking about programming, somebody who's 60 years old will probably want a completely different kind of services and programming than somebody who's 90 years old. So these are the kinds of things that we think about as we do our strategic planning and our visioning for how we're going to look into the future. So our participants are, as I reflected earlier, of the global demographic, increasingly diverse and getting older. The participants that we have want a variety of services. Yes, we do bingo, but that's not the only thing we do. We have all sorts of other things that we want. And this is because I think that the older adults of today want more kinds of services and programming. It's not your grandma's senior center, if you will. Our senior citizens are also increasingly tech savvy. We have computer tutoring that we do 4 days a week, and those sessions are completely booked. And here you see one of our younger computer tutors teaching one of our Asian participants how to use her smartphone, and she doesn't speak any English, so it's a very interesting dynamic. And there are a lot of people that are relocating to the coast, and so a lot of our participants may be without family. And so not only do we provide the services to people who are living on the coast, but also the families and the caregivers who may be calling to say, mom's had a fall, that kind of thing. So our services are not just locally here on the coast side. And this graph just shows a little bit about how much more we've been doing with less funds. You can see how many meals we provided back in March 2020 when COVID began, and how this has just, we had a huge steep increase. So our team doubled, tripled, and quadrupled the amount of meals that they were providing within a very short period. And over time, that has gone back down to a lower level, but it's still almost half as much again as the type of services that we were providing before COVID. And so there continues to be a great demand. And especially at times like this, when, as the Board of Supervisors person was saying, we're in the red zone. And so we try to make sure that the services and programs that we provide meet people's needs where they are. For some people, they really want to be in our congregate dining room. They want to be engaged and be with other people. Others want to only stay at home. Some people want to take their food to grab and go. Some people want to come for classes. Some people want to do it on Zoom. And so we really try to make sure that as we provide services, we do it for people who want to be together communing. And we also provide an opportunity for people who want to be online. Okay, so that's enough about senior coastsiders. I did want to flag for you some really interesting frameworks that I think it's helpful to use when you're thinking about older adults. So the first one is the California Master Plan for Aging. The second one is the Stanford Center on Longevity New Map of Life. And then the other thing is the AARP 8 Domains of Livability. So I just have a couple of slides about each of these that I'm going to go through. So the California Master Plan on Aging, it was created by an executive order of Gavin Newsom in 2019. He went through a process of trying to help his aging father to access care and to go through a process of dementia. And so he became very personally interested in the issues around older adults. And so the Master Plan on Aging, it provides a framework to really try to coordinate the level of service provision that is done and the policies and the procedures focused on older adults in California as a whole. So it includes 5 bold goals, 23 strategies. It has a data dashboard so that you can actually measure success towards, how we're doing, and a local playbook, which is suggestions for what people can do in their local communities. So the 5 bold goals of the California Master Plan on Aging. So one is housing for all stages and ages, that people can live where they choose in a community that is dementia friendly and climate and disaster ready. So that just covers so much, but that's one of their bold goals. The other one is health reimagined, that we will have access to the services we need to live at home in our own homes and to optimize our health and quality of life. Then the next one is inclusion and equity, not isolation, so that we will have lifelong opportunities for work, volunteering, engagement, and leadership, and will be protected from isolation, discrimination, abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Caregiving that works, we will be prepared for and supported through the rewards and challenges of caring for aging loved ones. And then the final one is goal 5, affording aging. We will have economic security for as long as we live. So Senior Co-Siders gets a lot of funding through the Older Americans Act. We just recently reapplied for 4 years of funding. And in our funding application, we had to say how our programs and services are meeting these California Master Plan on Aging goals. And so increasingly people, service providers and different coalitions, policymakers are organizing their thinking and their policies and their processes and grouping them under these goals, which I think will help to make a more cohesive strategy for how we deal with the issue of older adults. So that's one thing that's an interesting framework. Then something that I'm absolutely captivated by at the moment is the Stanford Center on Longevity has a new map of life. And what they're saying with this is that the model that we had 40, 50, 60 years ago, where it was almost like a 3-stage part of life. You did all of your education and your learning right at the beginning, and then you had a career in your family, and then you retired. And you retired when you were 65, and you probably died by the time you were around 70. So you didn't live all of that long. And you stayed in one job for a lot of the time. That model really doesn't work anymore. People are living much longer, as we've discussed earlier. Many people are going to live until they're 100 years old and older. And so this idea where you cram all your education into the beginning of your life, then you work really, really hard and don't have time to commit to your family and to do the things that you want to do in the middle part of your life. And then you retire at 65 and you live for another 30 or 40 years on a very limited income. That just doesn't work anymore. And so what they did with this new map of life is they got a whole lot of research fellows who each picked a particular aspect, and they tried to suggest some ideas for how we can live a longer life more effectively. So they talk about things like having life transitions being a feature of your life, so pathways in and out of the work environment, so you can spread your working life out much longer. You don't have to retire when you're 65, but you wouldn't be working at that same frenetic pace that we seem to be doing right now. And distributing your work over a longer life course also means that you have more time to spend at home with your families, to engage in personal pursuits, to engage in education. And so I really encourage you, if you're interested in thinking about aging differently, to have a look at the new map of life from the Stanford Center on Longevity. And one of the issues as well is, of course, building longevity-ready communities, so making sure that the environments in which we live are supportive of older adults. And the thing about those is that an environment that's supportive for older adults is supportive for everybody. Somebody who's in a wheelchair and walking, trying to get across a road, whatever structures are in place, like pedestrian crossings and properly timed lights, cross lights, that's also going to help a mom in a stroller. So just this whole idea that we need to think differently about how we approach 100 long year lives. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is something that Harvey knows about already. So the Coastside and Half Moon Bay went through a process towards the end of the year, and this is the last slide I have, I think. Went through a process last year where they interviewed a whole lot of people, asking them about the unmet needs of seniors in the different 8 domains of livability that you see here on your screen. So outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, communication and information, civic participation, respect and inclusion, health services and community support, social participation and housing. So we had focus groups that had, I think we had about 80 people drawn from as wide a representation of our community as possible. So from Pescadero to Montara in terms of geography, people of different ages, people of different economic backgrounds. And the question was posed, what are the unmet needs of seniors under these 8 different domains? We worked with a group that received Measure K funding through the Board of Supervisors, primarily, I think, through David Canepa. And so that group took all of this information and they developed a report, and there was an oversight committee that looked at all of the different findings and decided which were the most important areas to address for our Coastside community. And we then applied to the AARP to be part of their global network of age-friendly states and communities, and we received that designation in March. And so we're now embarking on addressing the needs that were identified. And Harvey is the co-lead of one of the groups, which is about accessing healthcare. So he's already shared how they're making fantastic progress in that subgroup. We also have a project about communication and information, and it came up that there are so many different opportunities for older adults on the coast, but we tend not to know about them. And so how can we provide real-time information in a way that is accessible to older adults, no matter how they use technology, or being inclusive of the types of different ways that they want to be communicated with. So there's communication, healthcare access. Then one of the others is, of course, the huge intractable issue of housing on the coast. So we know that as an age-friendly group, we are probably not going to be able to address the issue of housing, but the thing that we can do is to help people to know how to go about applying for housing, how to advocate for more housing. And so that group is going to do a workshop about accessing healthcare, and then that may include as well some advocacy around how we can position seniors and other people on the coast to be able to advocate in a clear and sensible way. Then the last issue is to do with business training. So there is a lot of ageism that happens that people don't even know about. I'm not sure if you're aware that there was recently an individual who was complaining about the ADA accessibility of various businesses on the coast. And so part of what this group will do is to try and train businesses to be age-friendly, to make sure that they have benches for people to sit on, ADA accessible bathrooms, and that their staff are trained in how to treat older adults with respect and not be ageist. And in Pacifica, they've done this, and businesses that participate get a little sticker that they put in their window that says that they're an age-friendly business. So that is one of the other projects that we're going to be working on. So if anybody would like to participate in any of these, I would be very happy to have you join us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me either now, or if there's no time, you can contact me at the details on the screen. Let's stop sharing now. You're on mute, I think.
All right. Thank you very much. You got a lot in a short time as well. I'll open it up first to questions and comments from the community, and then we'll do questions and comments from the council. Start with Sid.
Finally on my computer, I can find the controls easier. That was an interesting presentation. Now, I see you live in Moss Beach, and you didn't present what you said people were from Montero to Pescadero, but where was the majority of the people, Sandy? Were they all mostly in Half Moon Bay, or were they really spread out?
They were mostly in Half Moon Bay.
Yeah. And so my question is, we don't have any facility up here. And I did take Ready Wheels when I had knee surgery, and I took advantage of the Meals on Wheels program. But basically, if I wanted to participate in any senior Coastsider type issues, it would be down there, right? Drive down, drive back, 14 miles.
No,
pretty much.
No, since COVID began, most of our programming is also available on Zoom. So our physical activity classes, we have speakers, and you could still have meals delivered.
Yeah.
So a lot of we have changed our model to make sure that we, as to the extent possible, include people who are further up the coast. So I will say that I don't know if I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know that there is the new community center coming in El Granada, and we are certainly very interested in providing programming at that center. And so we would love to keep on your radar to be able to do that.
So my question basically was, when I took Ready Coast, I had to go over to Redwood City for a post-op surgery appointment, and I had to get a pass that took a while to get it processed. I think it's through Samtrans, but Ready Coast doesn't give able-bodied people rides down to the community center. Maybe I'm mistaken, but do they?
They do.
Able-bodied, not just handicapped? Okay.
Anybody, you would just have to call our office and make the arrangement with our office manager. She could schedule the pickup. They would pick you up, bring you to the center, then take you home again. And on Fridays, we do grocery shopping trips to Safeway and to New Leaf.
That's good, especially with the price of gas. But when do you still have to go over to Burlingame or wherever it is to sign up for that service? That's where I signed up.
Right. I don't think so. But if you call the office in the morning, they would be able to provide you with that information. But as far as I know, if you're coming to and from the center or to the grocery shopping, you don't need to, you're not getting medical transportation. You're getting transportation just to and from our building.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That makes it better to have to go to Half Moon Bay for that than to, frankly, I think they should have another alternative location and not everybody have to drive through gridlock to get a service. But thank you for your your answer.
We agree, and if we can have a satellite office in El Granada, we would love to do that. And if there's any buildings available in Montaro, we would be very interested in doing more satellite services.
Great. Greg, go to the council.
Sandy, that was well organized and presented. Good job. You thought this through. My two questions are, first, where do we go to have people we know apply to use your services? And where do we go for people who wish to volunteer with your group? I took a screenshot of your email and phone number, but I'm curious if that's what you want us to do, bury you with emails and calls.
You can totally bury me with emails and calls. I would be very happy to do that. But we have a really good website. And on our website, the place that I would direct you is there's happening sections. And we have a newsletter that we put out every month that is very, very comprehensive. It has all of the new upcoming events that are happening. It has all of our regularly scheduled classes, and it's a great resource. So it's under the happening section, or also on the homepage of our website. If you go all the way down to the bottom, I think it says the beacon. So if you click on that, that will tell you what is happening at the center. It tells you how to register for different events. So that is one way. Nobody has to apply for membership. Anybody who is interested in coming can come down to the center, pick up a hard copy of the beacon, talk to the staff, shadow one of the classes. If it's for something that's more technical, like more of a care management or social services kind of need, we have our care manager. We have a full-time care manager who's been with us for 25 years. She knows so much about the coast, and she's just the most wonderful, warm-hearted person. So she is the person who provides information, assistance, resources, and referrals to individuals who have a specific need. One of the other programs that I didn't even mention is we also do a medical device loaner system. So for anybody who needs a scooter or a wheelchair or a commode, we provide that service as well. And that's really for anybody who's in the community.
So I took the liberty of pasting into the chat the volunteer page, which has a phone number at the bottom of it. I think that's where you want volunteers to go.
Yes, I think there's a link on that page, and there's a little like information sheet where you would put all of your information, and then somebody will contact you.
Okay, and to sign up for services, you're saying go to the Beacon page.
So there's no signing up for services. You would just come and participate in services. So if it was a physical activity class or a creative class, you would just come along and see what is on offer.
Okay.
Okay, Dan.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, Sandy, and all the work that you do. So I have a question about aging and stairs. Now, you may be able to give me some insight, or you may want to direct me to some kind of resource that I could look into. But you know, everybody ages differently, and we all know that a lot of accidents for the elderly happen on a stair situation. So I guess I just wanted to see what you might have to say, or if you have any, you know, a lot of people don't want to admit, you know, they might be very comfortable in their living space, but if there's stairs, you know, it's you never know what year, right, that there could be a problem. So it's an interesting study for me right now. Is there any resource, or can you add anything?
Yes. So there is a full prevention coalition in San Mateo County, and they were recently funded to do home assessments where they can go into individuals' homes, assess the fall risk, which would include stairs, and then they would come up with some kind of remediation plan. So if you email me at the information that's on there, it's just my name, swinter@seniorcosiders.org. I'd be happy to try and connect you with that group. Our minor home repair program is also another option. We have put in ramps for smaller stairs, but if it's a really steep staircase, then we could discuss you know, if there were other things to do in terms of those chairs that go up and down. But I think if you email me, then I can connect you with Tracy, and I can work with you, and we can see what we could do to help.
Okay, thank you very much. And Claire, your hair, I see your new hair style. It looks really nice. I like it.
We'll put that in the minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Lynn, last comments would be from Lynn.
You're on mute.
Thanks very much for the presentation. In particular, when you were talking about the need to go to remote connections with COVID, it's been my experience with aging friends and relatives that older people are also much less capable in that area. So I would imagine you've noticed that, and therefore it takes really some fairly specific help. Do you have a way to identify people who want to be connected and also have technology issues to be effective?
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, we do have computer tutors that are in our offices 4 days a week. They see people on a half-hour schedule, and they can work with you to help you use your phone or your laptop or your computer. So that is one thing that we do. We also provide a lot of phone support for people who are trying to get connected. We have a Meals on Wheels delivery system, and so on occasion, if it's necessary, you know, maybe one of the Meals on Wheels person could go in, and while they're delivering the meal, could help set, just if it's a quick thing, help set somebody up on the computer. I would say that I think that prior to COVID, older adults had lived a life of not using technology. And so there was perhaps less of an incentive to use technology than younger people have who are just ingrained with it. But I would say that during COVID, when it became so obvious that technology was going to provide some kind of lifeline to the outside, older adults coped much better than people think. They were much more adept at being able to learn the technologies, maybe with a little bit more hand-holding. But once they realized the benefit to them, I think a lot of older adults were more willing to engage in the process and did pretty well.
I agree. The same phenomena was also present with school teachers, especially at the elementary level, where many would say they didn't have time or really couldn't get into it. And so they moved across that barrier rapidly. And I worked a lot with that sector. But it still seems to me that for those who are aging and have certain concerns to do it, I mean, can you go to the home to help them? Because they're not going to be bringing their computer in to help with you. So can you do on-site?
That would depend on the computer tutor. If they we don't pay the computer tutors, they're volunteers. So if they're willing to go to somebody's home and to do that help, that is totally okay. But because they volunteer, it's just easier for them to do it at the center. But we can provide phone support. We can talk to family members to help them. And if it was necessary, we could also send somebody around.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. That was really informative. I'm very grateful for you to come this evening. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is an introduction to Firewise communities. Our guest tonight is David Shue, who is with the Wildfire Defense Works program, which is out of Napa, and provides consulting and planning for, as they say, the crossroads of architecture and wildfire operations. As I understand it, this is much more about the built environment than the wild environment, but I will let David explain that to us. And so I'll turn it over to David. Welcome.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity. So to give you just a little bit of my background so that you can understand, I worked with CAL FIRE for 32 years, and I retired in 2018, just before the Camp Fire hit in Paradise, California, and have been doing consulting work with insurance companies, local jurisdictions, large landowners, developers, architects, trying to understand the wildfire environment and how to better, more successfully resist the fire problems. So one of the things that I wanted to bring with you tonight, one of the other factors that I'm involved with, is that prior to my career as a firefighter, I also am a licensed architect. And so I have this very sort of unique background where my training and background in understanding architecture, design, materials, construction, land use planning, all of those factors has really collided full speed at affecting, how wildfires today are affecting the built environment. So that really is where my expertise lies, in really looking at the structure impacts of wildfires that we see today. So one of the factors, one of the programs I work with, I'm on the board of directors with the State Fire Safe Council here in California. I also am working part-time with NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, which is the organization that has the Firewise USA communities. So there's two prongs that I wanted to talk to you about tonight. I wanted to kind of dive in and show you, and I'm going to share my screen here for a moment, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
It'll take me just a moment here. I thought I had it up. I'm looking at the agenda, but I want to go to NFPA. Here we go. So if you can all see my screen there, the Firewise USA program. This is the screen, and my understanding from talking with Claire is that there's a number of communities around the coastside area that are interested in gaining recognition as Firewise USA communities. So one of my first things I wanted to do tonight is to show you the website that you can go to and get started and explain to you how the program works and what it is, and help answer any questions that any of you might have about the Firewise USA in particular, but also on a broader scale, talk about wildfire impacts in general, about structure losses that we are unfortunately seeing on a rising basis year after year. So let me start with the Firewise USA program. This is a program that NFPA started 20 years ago in 2002. It now covers 43 states. And if you go to this website, this is a very simple website to get to. You can simply type in NFPA Firewise USA, and you will go to this website. So this is the homepage within the NFPA website where you can look up, and it has all the information that you need to know about Firewise USA. One of the sites on here is an interactive map, as you can see on my screen here, that shows you all the Firewise communities that are spread across the country. So as you can see, there's a large area and concentration in the Western United States, in the South Gulf Coast area, and also in the eastern region of the United States. If we zoom in, we can go in here and look. In the San Francisco Bay Area, you can see there's quite a lot of Firewise communities in the foothills. There's also quite a lot of Firewise USA communities in the South Bay Area, in the North Bay Area, and things like that. In fact, today there's over 1,900 Firewise communities spread out across the country, and over 500 of those are now currently in California. California is obviously a little bit, unfortunately, ground zero with the wildfire problem today. And so clearly a lot of communities are looking at the Firewise USA program to become recognized, to join together and help one another, make their communities more fire resistant, and so on and so forth. So this is simply an interactive map that you can go to and look at all the different sites, and you can pull up, if you go to these sites, I'm moving a little too fast here. If you click on one of them, for example, it will tell you where it is. This is in Woodacre, and it talks about the program and so on and so forth. But beyond just the map of where things are, I wanted to share with you the process of basically what the Firewise Communities program is. It is strictly a voluntary program. There is no code preparations, there's no permits required, there's no fees or anything else like that that are required. It is strictly voluntary. And what it is it basically allows neighbors in communities and neighborhoods who recognize the fact that they may have a wildfire problem in their community to come together and work as a group to identify what their fire hazards are and how they want to plan on working over time to reduce those risks of wildfire to their communities. So that, in a nutshell, is really what the Firewise USA program is all about, is getting neighbors to work together with other neighbors and help reduce the risk of wildfires impacting their neighborhoods. So in this Firewise USA site, there is a link right here called Prepare Your Home that you can click on, and it goes to a series of resources. Don't know why it's taking so long here, but there are some very good fact sheets that talk about how to prepare your home for wildfire. And it goes on, if you click on this, download it, it will go ahead and give you talks and some bullet points about vegetation management around your home, how to be prepared, helping emergency responders access your property, and then also go through and look at fire resistant construction. One of the things that is going to be important for any Firewise group is to work together with their local fire departments and their local law enforcement for evacuation purposes and things like that. Certainly, there's many, many sites that you can go to. CAL FIRE, of course, has a wealth of information on CAL FIRE's site itself. I know that many other programs. I'm also going to direct you to another organization called IBHS, which stands for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. IBHS is a nonprofit organization that works on behalf of insurance companies to do research and studies on disasters. They have a large testing laboratory back in South Carolina, in a small little town called Richburg, and they do testing there for hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and hail and wildfires. And so they have a machine that they blow embers at built structures and basically sit back and watch. And they are teaching us over the last 5 to 10 years, IBHS has been one of the leading organizations where we have learned how embers are the primary cause of almost all, roughly up to 90% of every structure that catches on fire in wildfires today is simply because of embers. Not the direct flames coming through the landscape, not because of radiant heat, but most structures ignite from embers. So really what we want to do is really focus on how do you protect your property and your home from embers igniting it. And that's what some of these links here will do. And if you go to the IBH website, they have just launched what is a brand new program that they've been working on now for a couple of years called Wildfire Prepared Home. And the Wildfire Prepared Home program that they have just issued the first certification for a formally recognized wildfire prepared home up in Paradise, California. This just occurred a couple of weeks ago. And it is a program that you can sign on to and pay for an assessment of your house, and then go through and do all the factors that would include vegetation management, good roofs, clean gutters, good windows, all of these kind of things that are spelled out that would help reduce the risk of your home from igniting from a wildfire. And you can receive a certification that gives you from IBHS the fact that you've met all their requirements and can be looked at as a wildfire prepared home, which then you could talk to your insurance agent and your insurance company. If you're being challenged with insurance issues from wildfires, this is the goal of this program is to help insurance companies be more receptive to people who've gone through all those preventative measures and become more fire safe. Firewise USA follows somewhat of the exact same track, except again, you don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to actually get a certification. But what it does require, in addition to these information bulletins about how to prepare your home, I'm going to walk you through the steps of going through and seeing how the, boy, I'm looking at my screen here. I have to go back to the Firewise USA site here. How to go through the screen and look at, basically there's 4 steps that you want to go through when you become a Firewise community. You simply have to get organized. And if you live in an HOA or a community that has a close working relationship with maybe evacuation routes or anything else like that, you probably already have an organization of your community. But once you get organized, we're looking for things, the numbers are right here. They want a minimum of 8 dwelling units in a Firewise community and not to exceed 2,500. Because if you start getting too big, then there's just too many people involved and too many people won't become active in it. So anything in that neighborhood, anything between 8 and 2,500, you can apply to become a recognized Firewise community. So first of all, you have to just get organized and make a decision amongst yourselves and your neighbors that you want to do this. The second step is to then start planning. And what you want to do is that you want to come up with a community wildfire risk assessment. Now, many of you may know about what's called a CWPP, or a Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And many cities and counties have CWPPs that are in place already. Those have a lot of the components that are required for the community wildfire risk assessment. But essentially what the wildfire risk assessment is simply a snapshot of what the conditions of your neighborhood are. How many homes have combustible roofs or non-combustible roofs? How many homes have good defensible space around them? How many homes have addresses that are clearly visible to help emergency responders access the sites? all of those kind of things. It's just basically an inventory of your community to look and see what is the current status of our community. And then once we know the status, you basically want to say, now what do we need to do to become more fire resilient? And so that's part of the planning process. You go through and put a wildfire risk assessment together. Now here's two links. There is a link for the template that Firewise USA has together. And this goes through, and you can simply go through this template, and it walks you through step by step, asking you what you want to do, how you want to recognize it, what you can do if you've never been on the NFPA site before. You can log on to create your own link and form a portal and say, we are Moss Beach or Montera or whatever community or whatever name you want to call your Firewise community, and you start putting your assessment together. And this is the template that you can use as the starting point for putting a wildfire assessment together. If you have any questions about it, it even gets a little easier. There is a tutorial video that walks you through with video links step by step, telling you how to go about through it. And you can start on this tutorial. And of course, I'm not going to go through it all tonight, but if you have questions when you are beginning your process and doing your assessment, if you want to go through the tutorial, it should answer most of your questions that you would have on how to go about doing that. The final thing that you need to do is that once you get your assessment done, your assessment will be evaluated and approved by CAL FIRE. Now, across the country, National Fire Protection Association, of course, is a national organization. And what they did, how they started the program 20 years ago, is that they connected with the state forester in every state. Every state has a state forester. In California, it happens to be CAL FIRE. It's other people in other states, but in California, CAL FIRE is the state forester. So what we do is that we have members of a group in CAL FIRE called the Land Use Planning Program. And the land use planners, who are captains, engineers, and battalion chiefs who are working on land use planning issues with cities and county governments all over the state, will receive the applications that various communities are putting in and review them and work with you to make sure that you are meeting all the requirements that they've set up in California. Then once they approve it, ship it off to the NFPA national coordinator, who will then recognize your community as a Firewise community. The assessment that you're doing is good for 3 years. It needs to be updated every 3 years because, of course, we expect that over that 3-year period, you'll do a lot of good work, and that within 3 years, you'll want to reevaluate. What have you achieved? What do you now want to do? So the assessment does need to be updated every 3 years. In addition to that, near the end of every year, October, November, something in that neighborhood, the NFPA requires every Firewise community to come back and say, we want to renew for next year. This is what we've done. And you can see that last bit there. You're actually working on the efforts that you're doing it after you become recognized as a Firewise community and you're doing it. I'll pick this up because you want to keep track of what you are doing. How many people are spending how much time doing all of this work? And this is, again, a simple template that you can use to help keep track of your time. What are people doing about hardening their homes or clearing their landscape, doing fire prevention work around their properties? All of these things can be put into this template. And then what you need to do at the end of it, after you're done with this, is that NFPA wants you to tell them about it. Share stories, go back onto the portal that you created to do your assessment and become a Firewise community, and then tell them about all the great work that you're doing and show the efforts that are going on. How many hours are being spent doing this work? How many tons of brush have you chipped? How many homes have been upgraded and improved? So all of these kind of things are basically up to you as a community. Again, your particular needs and what you need to do are going to be very specific to your community and may not necessarily be the same things that another community in Humboldt County or San Diego County are doing it. That's why it's very particular and specific for you. So that's basically what you have to do to become a FireWise community. You recognize your risk, you go ahead and get organized, you do your assessment, you get out and do the work, and then tell people about it and renew every year to continue your recognition as a FireWise community, and then re-up your assessment every 3 years. And basically that's it. So that is the FireWise program. Now, people are saying, well, what's in it for me? Well, one is that with neighbors helping neighbors, as these fires have been growing in severity and frequency across the entire country and the entire planet for that matter, there are growing levels of evidence that show that communities who work together have a much, much higher likelihood of fewer homes being destroyed, of communities being safer from the work that they've been doing. There's many, many communities across the state. And quite frankly, this is one of the things that I get a little angry about, is that the media never tells you about that. When you have communities in big fires that don't burn down, the media never rushes out a reporter to show you a community where nothing happened. But in my opinion, that's the entire story, is that the work and the efforts that people did there was the exact cause of nothing happening. And there's a huge story with that. And that should be celebrated, and more people should know about that. Maybe one of the biggest stories that we did hear a little bit about last year was the Caldor fire that we all remember, right? Burned across the Sierra Nevadas and burned up over the Sierras, and the entire South Tahoe shore was evacuated. But as we all know, the fire never made it to South Tahoe. And why? A large part of the reason was because for about 10 to 15 years, community members in that area have been working on some very aggressive fuel breaks and fuel treatment programs around that South Shore community. And the reporters did mention the fact that when that fire hit those fuel breaks and the work that they had done in those areas, the fire immediately lowered in intensity and spread rate, and it gave the firefighters the chance they needed to get in there and essentially save South Shore of Tahoe. And I would make an argument, and I think every other firefighter out there is going to be in agreement, that a large reason why South Lake Tahoe exists today is because of all the prevention work that had been done for quite some time in that area. That was a major contributing factor. It wasn't all of it, but it certainly contributed. I would make an argument that if they had not done those efforts, the outcome in South Shore would have been quite different and much more destructive. So we know this works. We absolutely know it works. We know how it works because of, if there's any silver lining to all these disastrous and catastrophic fires and the loss of homes and lives and everything else, the one silver lining is the fact that it has provided us with an extremely fertile laboratory to understand how and why fires are behaving the way they are and what we can do about it to reduce the risk and the threat of structures from igniting in fires. And that's what we're doing. So we know these things work. They can be employed. We're not at a position where we can guarantee anything yet, but we are getting closer and closer to that point. So I could keep going on and on and on. I could talk about this for a month. I have another whole PowerPoint that gets into more details and all kinds of things that I would be happy to share later on. But I wanted to first start out with the FireWise program. And I'd like to just make sure if I can answer any questions about FireWise specifically, and then I'd be more than happy to answer more broader questions about the wildfire conditions that we're suffering from right now and give you some predictions and things like that, what we might be looking at. So Claire, I'll let you take the floor and choose who would like to be the first person to ask a question.
I think I'm going to go ahead and mix the council and the public comments and questions, but I'd like to start with Len.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the talk. You gave us a lot of information. A question we have in San Mateo County currently, 3 different cities and 4 in total Firewise communities. And could you tell me the distinction for an individual, which is mostly what you were describing, what the role of a Firewise community is as opposed to an individual doing something Firewise for their home?
Sure. One of the biggest things that has become more and more obvious to us is that no one has the luxury of truly or adequately reducing the risk of their home individually by themselves in an independent manner. And why is that? It's because fires are not site specific. Basically, the simple fact is that what you do or don't do on your property and for your house, and what all your neighbors do or don't do, has a very, very direct impact on everyone's risk. It is a shared risk. Fires simply don't recognize a dotted line on a map, whether it's between property owners or communities or jurisdictions of state area versus federal lands. Fires don't care about dotted lines on a map. And so the holistic community involvement of everyone working together to collectively work on vegetation management and home hardening is going to very, very distinctly lower the risk level of fires impacting you and your neighborhood. We know that, we've seen that happen over and over, and it is simply the reality that people coming together. So if you had the most perfect home and perfect property with all the defensible space and all the right building materials, but your neighbors haven't done much to improve their homes or reduce their risk, your home is still very, very much at a very high risk. So it takes a village, quite frankly. Everybody needs to work together on it. And that's why the Firewise community was brought together, was to encourage neighbors to work together. Again, it's not a requirement. There's no code enforcement here. It's not anything that you have to apply for or get a permit. It is strictly voluntary for people to choose to work together as a neighborhood to help that. And that will help your entire neighborhood. Does that help answer your question?
It does. The details of getting that are not clear to me yet. I'm in touch with some of the other communities to find out how we've done it. But the bottom line is the group as a whole has to be identified. And I'm told that the minimum size of a community is 9. The maximum is 2,500 homeowners. But basically, the process of doing that, would we look to fire marshals to help in designating groups of properties? And you still have to contact the owners to make them aware of it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of it. I mean, when you first go up to this status and look at what the whole first step is, to organize it. And that does require go around, talk to your neighbors, talk to people asking, would everybody like to share together and work on becoming a Firewise community? And then over time, we all keep chipping away at the problem and improving our properties, improving our homes. Look, no one's expecting any of this to be done overnight. This is a huge problem that is going to take a long time and a lot of money to solve. But we have to start someplace. So getting your neighborhood together and getting neighbors to work together to do this is the best place to start. And definitely contacting your local fire station, your local fire jurisdiction, asking them to help you in putting your risk assessment together, getting their buy-in, giving you suggestions on what they think would be the best ways to help reduce your community risk. Absolutely, you definitely want their involvement. And CAL FIRE is very on board with this. They are helping hundreds of communities across the entire state do this right now. So it is something that is very familiar with them, and they'd be more than happy to help you with it.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to go to Greg. We've had some people on the council who have been especially interested in this, and Greg is one of them. So go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation and your efforts here. Well, first request I would have is, could you send me or the council the second slideshow that you mentioned?
I absolutely
We've been involved. Okay, we've been involved for a few years now. We've gotten, depending on how you count it, several $1 million from the county in grants
Yes.
to address various things. We've also done a scoping project recently that stopped short of simulating the ignition of the homes, but did simulate the ignition of the vegetation around us. A few quick questions. Does anyone of the members that you know of have some way of getting lower insurance premiums or restoring fire insurance coverage? Is there some case study or some guidelines for how that's done? I don't need the details, but I just would like to know how we would reach out to your model, group to find out what they did, because we have a problem there. I also wonder if we could find a case study or experts who've dealt with the similar risks we have with one evacuation route, eucalyptus, Diablo winds, onshore winds, and then finally, is there a standard for the sufficiency of wildfire defense programs, including evacuation and control of the spread of the fire? And where could we get a model of what the best standard for that kind of wildfire defense and prevention would be? So I know that's a lot of questions. If you give us your email, I'll write you the questions and I'll ask for pointers. Okay.
Right. Well, thanks, Greg, for your questions. And let me see if I can remember them all and go through them. First of all, yes, I will send you my PowerPoint. The one that I am going to send you is one that I prepared for a very, very similar meeting with this. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it's a retirement community up just outside of Santa Rosa called Oakmont. And Oakmont is a fairly large retirement community that unfortunately has had to evacuate at least once or twice every year in the last 3 or 4 years. They've also unfortunately lost a number of homes to various fires, from the Tubbs fire in 2017 to the Glass fire in 2020. So they're very, very familiar. They're very aware of their fire problem. They have been a FireWise community, I believe, since 2018. And they did the same thing. They reached out to me and said, could you please just talk to us? And, we've been working on this for a while, but what do we need to do to keep going? And what are the best steps that we can do? So I put a PowerPoint together for them, kind of sharing what the latest science and technology is about looking at the path of fires and how fire progresses through the landscape that could help them better understand the steps they need to take to better reduce the risk in their community. So I'll be happy to send that to you. Second of all, for the insurance question, yes, absolutely. FireWise USA has become the top program by insurance companies that are now looking at being able to offer deductions or benefits of being in a FireWise community to their members. The insurance company USAA jumped on board first in California to do a test case. I think they do it now in 7 or 8 states across the Western United States. And they offer a minimum 5% discount right off the bat to any of their customers who live in a designated FireWise community. So yes, there are benefits to it, and other insurance companies are coming on board very rapidly. They are utilizing one of the processes when you plan for your assessment. Part of that assessment is to actually draw a map and say, this is our FireWise community. These are the boundaries, and these are the people who are in it. So those maps are all hosted on NFPA's website. And the large company called CoreLogic is a research company that provides data to insurance companies around the country. And CoreLogic has access to all the FireWise community shapes across the entire state of California, and they share those with insurance companies. And what they tell us is that they are getting really run over with lots and lots of insurance companies asking to look at those shape files and wanting to use those to reevaluate their risk analysis so that people who might get a deduction, a reduction, or a renewal of their insurance figures. So yes, it does have some very close ties to the insurance world. As far as the modeling and the risk analysis and what you can do, there are a lot of companies out there that are studying that very problem and are putting together some really good analytics that can do fire predictive modeling through the landscape to look and see what kind of conditions might be present. I could share with you any number of resources that might be able to prepare for that. The other side of it is that CAL FIRE has a series of maps called the Fire Hazard Severity Zone maps. I'm sure probably most of you have heard of them or are familiar with them, but the maps that currently exist are fairly old. They were last produced in 2007 and 8, and they have been updating them since 2017. I'm told that in a very, very near future, they're going to be releasing the updated maps with a 2022 stamp on them that will improve and show a more granular evaluation of the hazard zones across the state of California. Those will be coming out very soon. So that might be the first thing to watch for, is when those maps come out, you can take a look at those new maps and it will share where those moderate, high, and very high fire hazard severity zones exist. So those will be coming out very soon in the near future, so I'm told. And I have to say, caveat, I have not seen them myself yet. I don't know what they look like yet, so I can't share anything with you as far as what they look like. There was another question that I'm sure I've forgotten now.
It'll be in your email in a minute. Don't worry about it.
Okay, that's fine. Why don't we go to another question and I'll circle back if I need to.
Okay, Sid, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Claire. David, that was a really excellent presentation. I have read up on FireWise communities, but I didn't really know if it would work in our area.
I can tell you it absolutely will.
Okay, how does CoreLogic get the information?
How does CoreLogic? They purchase it from NFPA.
Okay, and then is the high fire severity zone a GIS map so you can really hone in on a neighborhood?
Yes, when those maps come out, currently you can go onto the CAL FIRE website.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yes, so you can type in the maps and they break it down across the entire state with individual maps of every county.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I have 4 questions, so I'm not trying to rush you, but
okay.
I don't want her to cut me off either. So the question I had is, how wide does a fuel break have to be? Because our particular neighborhood butts up against county parklands, and it's all grassy up there. So I just didn't know if, you know, how much of a break you would need.
It all depends on a number of factors. The brake is going to be determined by, first of all, the type of fuel that you're putting a brake in. So certainly, clearly, grassy fields are going to be a very different fuel brake than a big, thick brush of manzanita
or eucalyptus.
Or eucalyptus and things like that. So the fuel brakes in those different fuels are going to dictate a lot of the decisions as far as what the size of a fuel brake should be. It's also going to be dictated by the topography. So where is it in relationship to the aspect? Is it facing the west? Is it facing the east, the north, the south? So there are a lot of factors that have to go into answering that question. There clearly is not a single answer for everything, but you can do evaluations that give you a guideline of what might work best in that area.
CAL FIRE might know too. Thank you. 2 more questions, so I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. You said it's a voluntary kind of a thing. What if you are trying to form one of these groups and you just have a curmudgeon-y neighbor that doesn't want to get involved? They are allowed to opt out, but you can still form your group, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I would say if you're drawing a map of your neighborhood, I would not take, if you have a curmudgeon of a neighbor that chooses and says, I don't want to be a part of this, don't take a red line and mark around their property and say this person isn't involved.
Right.
Keep the map as an inclusive map of your entire neighborhood, because here's what we've seen. I have to say that out of the almost 2,000 communities across the entire country, I'm pretty sure there is not one of them where that has 100% participation across the board.
Okay.
That's a very difficult thing to achieve. But what we've also found is that, especially when neighborhoods that are nearby one another, we amazingly see people jumping on board and competitions start occurring about who can, who gets to put the most tons of chip fuel in their portal and all those kind of things. And also what we find is that if all the other neighbors are working hard and doing all those things, many, many times we've seen the people who were resistive at the beginning turn around and say, okay, I'll help.
Right.
So no guarantees, of course, but we have seen and heard about stories like that across the entire country. So don't give up on them.
Okay, I haven't started yet, but I just wanted to know, you don't have to have 100%. Okay, and the last question is, you mentioned that embers are the most significant cause of fires, but you left out a really important word there, and that's wind-blown embers. And we live on the coast where there's lots of wind. And how far... I know in Paradise, they said they were going miles,
yes.
The wind was so strong, but I don't live in a community where there's a huge amount of trees. We do have the grasslands nearby, but Quarry Park is just across the highway from my neighborhood, and it's like a huge tinderbox full of eucalyptus trees. So how far would I have to live from that potential big fire that might blow an ember all the way across the highway into my neighborhood?
Well, you said it yourself early on. And in wind-blown fires, yes, we are seeing embers that are driven by several miles in front of the fire front. So you're never going to build a fuel break large enough to stop just environmentally, you wouldn't be able to do it. Nor would we really want you to. So we need to recognize the fact that when those wind-blown embers are coming towards your house, think in terms of doing an assessment and evaluation on your house and look at it very carefully, from the vents to gutters to all the cracks and crevices and corners and decks and everything on your house. And how would you be able to avoid an ember taking hold and beginning an ignition of your property, or igniting landscaping around your house that might then ignite your house? All of those kind of things are what you want to start doing. And again, I put on whole classes that last for a day, getting into very, very minute detail about all this. And I'm not going to have time to do it tonight, but there are a lot of resources available to you to help do those kind of evaluations. And more communities are coming on board and requiring those kind of things, especially, as Greg brought up, as grants are coming forward. These are some of the features and functions that some of those grant dollars are beginning to pay for.
Well, I mainly asked the question because of complacency.
Yeah.
Like, our neighborhood isn't right next to Quarry Park. Maybe people say, oh, there probably won't be a fire over here. But that's why I want to know how far wind-blown embers might travel. But I think I already knew, since I watched that Fire in Paradise PBS documentary many times. Thank you.
Also, just a couple of months ago, we saw 20 homes burn down right on the coast of Orange County, down in the Laguna Beach area. And all of those homes, virtually every single one of those homes, were ignited because of the embers blowing on the coastal winds, blowing in. And once that vegetation ignited and was blown by the onshore winds, that's what ignited all those homes. So keep in mind that it can happen anywhere.
Thank you. I think that website's really great resource, and hopefully you've typed it into the chat. And also, maybe if we did have a big enough neighborhood, could we contact you for a live presentation or even a Zoom presentation, or you don't give them to startups?
No, I think this is part of what we want to do, is we want to help people get started. And
then can you type your contact info into? That'd be great.
Claire has it also, and I'll make sure she has, so she can distribute and share with the entire group.
Okay, in the chat would be nice. Thank you.
I'll do that before I log off.
I'll take two more comments, one from Dan and from Michelle. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dave, for your great presentation and information. Very valuable to our community. You mentioned, talked about roof vents. I remember Supervisor Horsley actually brought it up to our attention at an MCC meeting more than a year ago. That a lot of the houses get ignite from embers going into the roof vent. Yes. I understand there's different ways to mitigate for that. I think I heard that there's steel wool filters or something that could prevent. I wanted to see if you could comment on that, and then I also have a couple more questions.
Sure. So steel wool might be a little problematic, and here's why. Because steel wool could obstruct just normal airflow from going back and forth as it is needed for those concealed spaces. So the whole purpose for vents in attics and roofs and concealed spaces is to provide airflow to reduce any kind of moisture buildup that would create mold, mildew, rot in construction materials, all those kind of things. So at the same time, whatever material we choose to go ahead and reduce the impact of embers coming in, we also still have to remember that the vent has to serve a purpose, a very real purpose on a daily basis. Right. And that's for the airflow. So if you think about what steel wool is, the compactness of it and the density of it, it could be a little difficult to restrict the airflow in the appropriate, air movement that it needs to be. But there are many products out on the market. I've just recently become aware of a new product that has been being used in Australia for over a decade. And it's a stainless steel 1/16 inch mesh that has proven in Australia to be extremely resistant to embers from entering concealed spaces through the vents. And they're even using them for fencing or screening around the bottom of decks so that embers can't get underneath the deck and burn anything, and things like this. So there are products on the market that are extremely interested. If you're interested in that product, it's a product called Bushfire Mesh, because it's Australia, so they call them bushfires down there. And that's the name of the product. It's a bushfire mesh. And so that's what they're interested in. And, that's a product that they finally decided after 10 or 12 years that, hey, we should take this up to the United States and share it. So it's a new product that not many people know about up here yet. But like I said, there's any number of new innovative products that are helping to solve those problems of embers getting into concealed spaces.
Thank you. And you've said, we're all in this together, and it's important that we all work together. From your perspective, neighbors include the public agencies and their fuel load.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are sometimes difficult conversations to have because, of course, they're large bureaucracies. If you're adjacent to a state park or federal lands or things like that, and whether or not they have the staffing or the budgets to be able to do their piece of the job, what I have seen is neighborhoods approaching public agencies and asking if we helped. Would you allow us to go onto your property and help do some of the vegetation management if you can't? Provide us with some of the tools and things and we'll help do the work, but it helps reduce everybody's risks across the board. So I've seen some very creative ways that public agencies have partnered with nonprofits and neighborhood groups, HOAs, and people like that to start sharing that responsibility.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. I do have some ideas on that, but let's see. My last question is, you mentioned that the fire risks maps are not up to date, and that there's some new maps out there that are more accurate. My question is, what has changed to change the fire risk?
The main change that has occurred is the analysis. I mean, if you think about back in 2007, 2006, 2008, when the previous maps were being analyzed, clearly our knowledge, our databases, our computer technology, our GIS data capabilities, everything has changed. I mean, basically, here we are 14 years later, something like that, if I'm doing the math correctly. So it's like an entirely new world. We're light years beyond the capacity and the data that we had back in 2006, 7, and 8 when those earlier maps were done. So we have better weather layers. So we understand wind better. We understand the impacts of vegetation on communities and structure to structure fire spread, like we saw in Coffee Park, for example, and things like that. So those factors have been utilized now to produce these newer maps that'll be much more accurate.
Okay, some of them have increased. Some of them maybe have increased the fire danger, and some of them maybe have reduced as a result of the new information.
I don't want to speak because I haven't seen them. Okay. I'm just as anxious to see them as everybody else.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for your help.
You're welcome.
There, you're on mute. Again. Are you calling on me?
No. Did you still have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Oh, okay. I thought I did. Someone may have taken it down.
So we do it. I wasn't sure if Michelle was wanting to ask something, but
yeah, I did.
Please do.
One other question. Well, two small questions. So thank you for this presentation, David. It's really fantastic, and I think Firewise is kind of perfect for our community. You know, we have a really eager, involved group of people. Everyone wants to, do something, but oftentimes it's hard to figure out what to do. And so this seems like a great first step. First question was just about, do you have an estimate of the number of hours or even the budget that would be required for a community to set something like this up?
Yes. So the number of hours, you're probably all even going to laugh at how simple this is. When you go through and set up your assessment, they're going to want to ask you to say, tell us what you've already done. I mean, they want to see communities that have already engaged and started taking steps. I know for a fact down in San Mateo County that groups and communities such as yours have already been working on things. You've been doing vegetation work. People have been doing work on trying to build better defensible space on your homes and things like that. So you're going to meet all the requirements. It won't be a big leap for you to do that. You just have to record it and get it all on paper. But for your renewal, when you renew every year, in the later part of the year when you're renewing, they want to see if you have 100 people, 100 residential structures in your Firewise community, you're required to have 1 hour of work per structure per year. So that would be 100 hours of work, which probably all of you collectively do every weekend. So the fact is,
work in creating defensible space or hardening.
Absolutely. And if somebody is, let's say, for example, replacing their roof or putting, redoing their landscaping and things like that, those are all contributing activities that can be counted towards improving and reaching your goals of becoming a more Firewise community.
Got it. And then my last question.
There's on the website, there are lists of examples. You can go on and see, here's a list of suggestions and examples of things that you can use. So it's a very comprehensive list that you'd be surprised that most likely you're all doing all of it already. You're just not tracking it and keeping track of it.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. My last question is just in terms of thinking how we can get people, organized. People are interested and eager, but how to get them organized. One idea I had is we have a pretty active local CERT community emergency response team here on the coast. I'm wondering if that could be maybe, if you've seen examples of other regions working with CERT to help get people organized and ready.
I think, that's certainly a good starting point. Mm-hmm. And the very fact that you have this organization that we're talking with here today, that's another good organization. I mean, you've already got a lot of organizational examples and structures that are totally ready for you to go ahead and tap into and use as your starting point to get things rolling. So I think you guys are well prepared, and I think you'd be surprised at how much you've probably already done. And it wouldn't involve an enormous amount of work and effort to go ahead and put it all together. I think the biggest thing is just, of course, you need to collectively go around and gather all this data and choose and, as a group, decide, what is our risk and what do we want to do to try to reduce that risk? What are going to be the biggest things that we want to do, and then chisel away at those and work at them over time. And then every 3 years, update your assessment and keep working at it, because that's what works. And we've seen that happen. Like I said, with South Lake Tahoe, they had been working on it there was a big fire there about 12 years ago called the Angora Fire, and over 400 homes were lost. And it was the Angora Fire that really jump-started South Shore to really start working on this. And they've been working hard on it ever since. And then when the Caldor Fire hit, they all evacuated safely and they all survived.
Yeah.
So it does work.
Yeah, I was watching that fire pretty closely on Twitter and stuff, and because I'm from that area, El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, and I was shocked at how I thought South Lake Tahoe was going to be pretty bad off, but it was amazing to see how well that fared in that, and so it's great. Yeah, I hope we can do the same in our community.
Perfect.
Okay. David, thank you very much. I think this is one of the most valuable presentations we've seen in a long time.
Well, thank you.
These meetings are recorded. I know there's a lot of people in the community that are interested in this sort of thing who aren't here tonight. So I'm hoping that people will direct them to maybe take a look at the recording of this meeting and see what they think.
Right, and if you'd like, I can also do the research through my CAL FIRE contacts and such, and make sure that you have a direct contact with one of the CAL FIRE members who would be responsible for helping you in your area. And you could contact him directly, him or her, and start working on it right away.
Sounds wonderful.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great evening, everybody.
You too. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, we'll move on to our next item. We've a lot of good things here tonight. Barbara Dye is going to do the second in her series of history presentations, and this one is on Ocean Shore Railway.
Thank you, Claire, and thanks for that great presentation. It was very interesting and valuable. Oh, I need permission to share my screen.
Oh. Dave, can you get her? There you go. Thank you.
You should have it now. Sorry.
There we go. I had the same problem I had before. I need to just minimize this. Well, good evening, everyone. This is part 2 of our presentation on the history of the Midcoast side. Ocean Shore Railroad reaches the beaches. Last time we talked about 100 million years. This time we're going to talk about 20 years, so a little shorter time. We're going to use scans from the photos that Barbara Vanderwerf has donated to the History Association, which I am scanning and archiving to turn over to the History Association with the understanding that we can use them for an eventual history presentation in the new community center. It relies on her book, Synonym for Paradise, as well as The Last Whistle, and the books, the Ocean Shore Railroad, Moss Beach, and Princeton by the Sea. I had the chance to go. We were on a trip up to Seattle, and I actually got to spend a little time in an afternoon with Barbara Vanderwerf, which was terrific, and she's very excited about the history that we're doing here. So we left our last presentation at the end of the 19th century. There were small farms over the coast side. There were eucalyptus trees beginning to be planted. As you may remember, this is Gumtree Lane. It used to go from about where Wilkinson School is up to where Quarry Park is, planted in the 1870s. The farming was good here. The soil was good, but it was hard to get here. And the road across Montera Mountain existed, but it was really difficult to get a cart across it. There's some great stories about the stagecoaches coming through it, and coming into Half Moon Bay on 2 wheels and stopping before the hotel. But it wasn't a really practical way to travel and bring crops and so forth back and forth. So this was also the era after the railroads had come in. We're talking around 1900. Everyone was excited about the railroads. There were a lot of rich people in San Francisco. They got rich, some from mining, but more from retail sales, from real estate development, from just various kinds of commerce. One of the most successful was a man named J. Downey Harvey, who was, according to the book The Last Whistle, a popular clubman with a scintillating personality. So Harvey is the one who came up with the idea of a rail line down the coast. There were rail lines going down the bay side. There were ideas, new rail lines going in everywhere, but he's the one who said we need to send one down the coast. And he put together a pretty great team. Folger, who was from the Coffee Guy, Pillsbury, who was the attorney for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, one of the biggest railroads, and Charles Moore, who was the president of a very large and respected engineering firm, and a bunch of other people. But it was a really solid group of people who got together to form the Ocean Shore Railroad. And I like this picture right here because that's Harvey over there with the cane. And then there are 2 mayors, both the past and the current mayor, including the guy, I think it's the guy with the guy, the second from the left, who is the one who was considered to be influenceable with gifts and so forth. But the funny thing is, the bottom of it, it says Bohemian Jinx, which makes you wonder what they were up to that could be described as Bohemian Jinx. So the first thing, let's see if I can move this. So the first thing they had to do was get the land for it. And so they hired people to go down and buy land. They didn't really tell people what they were buying it for, but they had cash, and they also bought the right-of-way within the city of San Francisco. And it was alleged at the time that the mayor was influenced by the gift of a large Turkish rug from Harvey, which I think is great. The promoters knew that it would be difficult. They were aware of that. It would need lots of culverts and bridges. They'd have to go across the Devil's Slide. But the contract was awarded toward the end of 1905, and they started right away. They began the tunnel through San Pedro Point and then clearing and grading the route along the coast. Their plan was that their route would travel along a route that was where the ocean was visible at all times. That was important to them. So they really stayed right over by the coastline. There we go. They had already started work, but then, of course, on April 6, 1906, the Great San Francisco earthquake happened. Some people think that this stopped them or happened before they started, but no, they were well underway by the time the earthquake happened. They'd already reached Muscle Rock with their lines, and during the quake, more than 4,000 feet of railroad track and a great deal of construction equipment fell into the ocean, and so that was a huge blow to them. Also, huge chunks of earth fell down upon the areas. You can imagine what happened in the landslide when the earthquake happened, covered the areas that they had already cleared for the tracks. This picture is not of the Ocean Shore Railroad, but it is some railroad tracks in Marin after the earthquake, which kind of shows what would have happened to them. And they weren't dissuaded. They were determined to build their railroad. But they did decide to abandon their visionary plan, which was to have, I don't know if people know this, a 2-track electric railroad. They were going to have the brand new, newfangled electric railroad. But at this point, they decided that was too expensive, and so they went with the conventional steam engines. By 1907, they had some of it working, and they were starting to get revenue. And then the next thing they were thinking about was real estate development. So they started developing the various communities from Pacifica North and then down where we are and all the communities that we know today. These are just some pictures that show kind of what it was like to cross the slide after they had put in the line. And in the bottom right one shows what happened when the train got to a point where a temporary landslide blocked it, and people would sometimes have to get out of the train, walk along that steep cliff, and then get on another train to keep them going south. So everybody was really interested in making money on real estate. It was happening all around the state. And so this map shows our whole area, all the different tracts that were put together for being proposed or land was being purchased for, all the way from Montera down to Miramar. So you can see lots of, I don't even know what Hanneman's Farallone was, but you can see that there were a lot of different proposals to buy and develop land along the proposed route of the railroad. But the people who were building the railroad, the Ocean Shore Railroad Company, created a second entity called the Shoreline Investment Company. And their goal was to purchase real estate. Harvey was the president, and the same people were involved. They concentrated on the western coast here, and they sent they wanted their own specific, their community, as opposed to all these other ones. They sent an agent south who purchased 1,271 acres for $60,000 to create El Granada, which at that time they were calling Balboa. So Harvey was really the driving force behind this. He wanted his new community, their new community, to be the best in California. And so he went to the most famous landscape architect in the Western world, who had completed the Chicago Exposition. Interestingly, he did much more than that. He was the leader with Frederick Law Olmsted of the City Beautiful movement, which went to various cities around the country and said, hey, maybe you should stop and think about how to make your city better. You should have parks, you should have boulevards. He was very influential in changing the look of cities all across the United States. He did agree, when he was asked to design the new community of Balboa, he said he would do it. And in addition, he wasn't sure he was going to make it to visit, but he wanted an accurate 3D model of the terrain. And he hired a young English architect to help him with the project. And Bennett came and provided the maps, photographs, and models that the two of them worked on together in the office in Chicago. So Burnham and Bennett together put together the plan in October of 1906 for the layout of the street. At that point, the town had been renamed Granada because the post office would not accept Balboa. And I don't know exactly why, maybe because of Balboa Island down south. But Harvey said, in the years to come, Granada will rank with the most beautiful cities in the world. And Barbara Vanderwerf, in her book, said that the fact that the El Granada is the only Daniel Burnham town built in the United States is enough to make it a national treasure. So we all complain a little about the layout and the confusing streets, but it does remain one of the few towns that was designed by a famous landscape architect. And I think that makes it pretty special. So it was designed for people who would walk from their homes down to the train station. The plans included a casino, which was not for gambling, but a place where you could have parties and see shows and so forth, a theater. There were supposed to be piers, lots of walkways, and above this were terraces with public parks, including one more or less where we're proposing to build a park. And in spite of the fact that some people blame Burnham for the eucalyptus trees, his proposal was not for eucalyptus trees on the medians. He wanted moderate growth trees, such as acacias, araucarias, also monkey puzzle trees, pepper trees, locust trees, and palms. He did not want tall eucalyptus trees, though he was okay with them up above the community. He wanted a greenery up above it. And so they started right away. They built a temporary train station. And on June 21st, 1908, the town was officially open. These are actually pictures of the first day with people coming from San Francisco. 500 people came on a chartered train. It had been chartered by the land agent, Charles Kendrick, who was also one of these, entrepreneurs and go-getters, a really interesting character. He brought 500 of his best project prospects to town, and they provided them with lunch and showed them around. But then behind that train, there were 9 more trains run by the railroad to bring visitors and more potential customers, because everybody wanted to come down and see Granada. You can see the buggy there. Some people went on down to Half Moon Bay and various other places to look at real estate opportunities there. Here are more views of opening day with the steam engine coming down. And then you can see one of what the countryside was like. And this is dated 1908 of a train leaving El Granada and heading north. Now, Kendrick had a reputation. He was a pretty smart guy. He was experienced in selling real estate, and he was given the rights to sell 400 acres worth of lots. And he set up offices in various cities all around California, and they put together this marketing campaign. Here's the Ocean Shore Railroad reaches the beaches with some kind of, I don't know, conquistador kind of people in it. We have 2 of the full-page ads that are trying to sell El Granada that were published in the San Francisco newspapers that Barbara Vanderwerf has given us. They're too big for me to copy, but they're multiple colors and so forth. The salespeople were all trained to talk about El Granada, and one of them wrote down part of his spiel, which gives you the numbers, which is he told his potential buyers. You will understand that why we have sold nearly 2 million of these beautiful lots in the past 2 years to the best people in the state of California. And actually that line comes up in a lot of the ads that Granada would be for the best people. Lots that averaged in price between $450 and $500 for a lot 50 by 100 feet. And there were 3 main selling points that they had. First, the natural setting. This very beautiful place with a nice beach. Second, the design by Burnham, and this was something that was a really good selling point for Granada because they were competing with all the other communities that were being developed along the coast. And the third was the fact that the owners of the development company were also the people who owned the railroad, so that this particular real estate development would get lots of special attention. So they built several different train stations. The one on the top is Granada North, which is still there. You can see it. It's where Monster Chef used to be. You can see the train station kind of buried in the residential addition that's been put on the back and so forth. One of my dreams is that after we do all this investment in the park and the community center, someday we buy that building and turn it into a nature center and a history museum. But I don't know. I'm not counting on that. They also built, the whole area around Portola was an open space with some landscaping called Plaza Alhambra, and that's where the temporary train station was. And then they had promised that's where they were going to build a grandiose big train station, but they never did. They did build the bathhouse, and that was built on the beach down below, and it was reached by walking across a grassy meadow, and it had room for gatherings and for changing into bathing attire. And in 1910, 300 people came to its grand opening. And of course, the people who built this town wanted it to be the best, and they wanted everything done to the highest quality. Most real estate developments didn't do this. They did not build all the infrastructure first, but the Shoreline Investment Company wanted everything done to the highest quality. They built a water system with a reservoir up the hill and a sewer system to serve 10,000 people. They laid 42 miles of water and sewer mains. They graded and paved 52 miles of streets and 42 miles of concrete sidewalks. And the major contractor was a man named Christensen, who went on to a number of other high-profile projects. You can still see his mark in some of the sidewalks in El Granada. There's one of those marks just on Portola, just at the bottom of the median. And then he later retired and raised chickens in El Granada, where he was known as the mayor of El Granada. The third train station was down on the southwest side of town, where the elementary school is now. That's where the railroad company brought in the lumber and the building materials, cement, tons of rock for the streets from the Rockaway Quarry in Pacifica, and miles of pipe. And they were unloaded there at the South Granada station, which had 1,000 feet of siding, warehouses and sheds, plus a factory that made containers for artichoke shipping, there were still farms that were growing artichokes, and they were in great demand. So they were making special containers for the artichokes. And then produce also went to market there. So they shipped the building materials down and then produce back up to the city. The first building that was built, because this was an industrial area, the lots were a little bit cheaper. So $250 for a 25-foot wide lot. So some of the first houses in town were built in that area. Some of the first lots that were sold were there. And in 1908, on Francisco Street, they built the first house. It's a beautiful house, and it was built for the resident manager for the project. And you can still see it on Francisco. And as you walk around that area, you can see some of the small original houses that were built at this time. And we're to the thorny question of why is it El Granada? The new town needed services, and the Hotel Granada was one of the first buildings that went up. Nobody knows why the owner of the hotel called it El Granada, since in Spanish, Granada means pomegranate, and it is feminine, so it should have been La Granada. But at any rate, the hotel owner wanted to have a post office in town, and he wanted it to be in the hotel, which was common at the time. And so he put out an ad for a postmaster. And supposedly he got 2 applications, and on one of them they had applied to be the postmaster of Granada, and the other one had written L in front of the town's name. And since he thought this was a good deal to have the town be called the same as his hotel, he accepted the second applicant. And the U.S. Post Office accepted the name, and that's what it is, even though people who speak Spanish wonder exactly how this came to be. By 1910, there was a general store, a church, which you can still see on Isabella, but it doesn't look like the original building very much anymore. Take a history walk and we'll point it out. 2 boarding houses and about 15 homes. It wasn't working out the way that they hoped it would, because their idea had been that people would commute to San Francisco, but they didn't really do that. It was too hard to commute. It was much more time to get to San Francisco than they had said. And the train was just not particularly reliable. There were a lot of landslides and various other problems. So most of the early residents of El Granada were involved in either building there or shipping some of the farm goods, or working on some of the businesses that were associated with the early town. Now, the same sort of thing was happening in other parts of the Midcoast. Now, nobody's written the comprehensive book on the other communities, so I don't have as much information about it, but Frank Brophy had bought the land across the railroad tracks toward Pillar Point, called it Princeton by the Sea. He built the Princeton Inn, and other hotels and restaurants came. And it's not clear how many lots he was able to sell, but certainly they set up a number of hotels and restaurants that were visitor serving, and people came down to visit for the weekend. In Moss Beach, they had a beautiful train. It's really too bad that Moss Beach train station didn't survive. There were hotels there, Wenky's Moss Beach Hotel and Nye's Hotel and his Reefs Restaurant. It was actually a much bigger community than El Granada. There was a bakery, a plumbing shop, post office, weekly paper, the Coastside Comet, a planing mill, misspelled, blacksmith, grammar school, dentist, and barber shop. And some 50 are, as they say, artistic bungalows. And Montera had a train station and lots available for visitors who are interested in coastal property. By 1909, the Ocean Shore Railroad was in trouble. They bought a lot of their equipment on credit. They couldn't complete the line all the way down to Santa Cruz. There was competition from automobiles, and in the south, somebody put a parallel train line in, and began shipping cement, which had been one of their key sources of revenue. And the line that they had so quickly built from San Francisco kept having problems and needing repairs. So in 1909, they declared bankruptcy. And you can see there's a car that sort of shows you cars were already happening by 1910 and proving to be competition for the railroad. At the bankruptcy hearing, the company was bought by the same people who had owned it before at about half the price. So they did buy it back and try to keep it going. They did do a few more things for El Granada, but they added electric lines, and they took the El Granada station and rolled it on logs up to the top of Portola Plaza, where it still stands, to serve as a clubhouse. But they didn't really have a lot more money to put into it. They tried a few experiments. This picture over on the right, and actually that same engine is in the picture of the Moss Beach station, which is a new experimental gasoline-powered engine. But that wasn't enough. They struggled all through the 19-teens, facing more competition. There was a big strike in 1920, which really hurt them. And even though a lot of businesses and companies went to court and said that if they were allowed to shut down the railroad, it would really hurt their businesses and their communities, the company applied to abandon its line. And on October 10th, 1920, the California Railroad Commission said, okay, you can abandon the northern part of the line. And they took it all apart, sold the track to a railroad in Siskiyou County, and sent back a lot of the equipment to their creditors. They kept the right-of-way and some of the properties, and that ended up having years of litigation. You can still see the route of the railroad through. A lot of times when they graded it to make it be a level route, you can see that where the railroad went through, there's kind of an elevated area. You can see that at the bottom of Portola. And you can see pieces of railroad track that are in the picnic tables at Quarry Park and on the Balboa Median. Now, the real estate venture also had the same kind of problems, and it was dissolved in 1922. They sold a lot of their land to the local farmers, and we're going to talk about the farming history next. And those farmers were the leaders of the next chapter in Northern Coastside history as the automobile changed the coastside. And so here we are, Ocean Shore Railroad, artichokes and gangsters next.
Okay, well, stay tuned. Anybody have questions for Barbara or comments? Sid. Sid, yes. Go ahead.
Jumped. I just wanted to mention that there was a slide that you said you didn't know what those things mean, but I do. It was about Hannemans and all the different names of those towns or stops or whatever. Farallon City and Farallon Heights is still Montera. Then they had, and so is Hannemans, but then in Marine View Beach, Marine View Terrace, Riviera Ocean Tract, those are all parcel tracks when they laid out all the lots for like Seal Cove is those are on the west side. and then it goes into Francisco Heights and everything, Princeton by the Sea. But those are all, if you go look up any parcel maps on the county website, you'll see those names.
Yeah, I was just saying I didn't really know the source of a couple of those names. I knew that they were tracks. They were different tracks because that's what was happening.
But then anyway, I just wanted to let you know because I was researching something for where they are going to try to shoehorn in the low-income housing in Moss Beach. And Carlos Street used to be the Ocean Shore Railroad or Highway 1. So that's interesting. Now it's just a tiny little thing, tiny narrow street. But I guess they put Highway 1 where the Ocean Shore Railroad used to be.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, they tried to do something really remarkable, and they did succeed partly. I mean, they built a train down this difficult coast, but
they built sidewalks in Seal Cove. You can still see some of the old funky sidewalks, but they would let people off at the train station and then walk them out to pick out their lot. And then there was a lot of 25 by 100s, and they gave those away in bingo games, I heard, from one of the old timers that used to live out here.
Cool, I never heard that. That's great. Yeah.
Barbara.
Dan.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's really interesting. Boy, we're just rich of history in this area, aren't we? I like what you said about the original El Granada train station. But I guess, did you say that one of the train stations, not the El Granada train, it was not moved? The El Granada train, or what was the Monster Chef restaurant, that was the north
yes.
And that was never moved. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, the other one was moved. Okay.
Yes.
All right, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that was my question. And yeah, thanks again. It's very interesting.
And I forgot my disclaimer, which is I am not a professional historian at all. I just think this is cool. And I'm very interested in it. And it's fun to sort of pull together some of the interesting stories.
It is cool, yeah.
Come to life. So.
Well, the best stories come from people who just plain think it's cool. So thank you very much. And we'll look forward to the next episode.
Yeah, it's got some really amazing stories in it.
I bet.
All right. Good night.
Good night. What we have to do the rest of this main agenda time is 3 decisions about MCC management. We need to talk about what newsletter articles are going to be assigned. We need to talk about participation in MidPenn's 50th anniversary celebration, and then make a decision about secretarial roles. So, Michelle, you want to start with the newsletter?
Sure, yeah. So it's been about 3 months since our last newsletter went out. We're kind of going on about a 3 times a year cadence. So it's definitely time to start thinking about the next newsletter, which would be our summer newsletter. And I would aim to get that out in about 4 weeks, including, allowing time for translation into Spanish. So I just made a brief list of ideas of things that we should include in the newsletter. We also I would love to have a volunteer to have someone do the editing. I think previously it had been Jill. Dave stepped in last time, and I continued with the technical setup. But I can do one of those things, but I can't do both. So I need a volunteer for one of those things. And then, the ideas that I had in terms of the letters were definitely the El Granada scoping project. That's probably been one of the biggest things that we've done over the last few months. And we'd want to write a report or summary of the findings from that report. Just put a couple other ideas here, but I would really need people to volunteer to write letters. So I really love the El Granada history presentation. I'm not sure if that's being shared in other communications just within El Granada or not, but I thought we could, potentially have something on that. There's a Media Creek Bridge update that Dave gave. I don't know if that warrants a whole article. There is the parallel trail, and then there's the airport and the lead issue, which we wrote about last time, but we could do an update. Seelan has his hand raised, looking for ideas or
sort of
volunteers.
You had talked about the scoping project. I was taking a little bit different tack on that, but the article I'm interested in is both in the area of transportation and wildfire, that we've reached a point where there are major things coming forward that will require extended conversation and input from the community. So I wanted to basically outline the nature of those two efforts, because I think they'll require spending time in several meetings. So it was a backgrounder. I would rather go with wildfire than the scoping project, because RCD announced that with their report, the scoping project itself was done. And now what we're dealing with is, where do we go from here? But with respect to their recommendations, they had 18 project areas. And then we have the Firewise or other approaches to deal with the community, which was outside the scope of that. So I was interested in turning that into an article on those two items.
Yeah, just remember that typically the articles that we write are not necessarily forward looking, but talking about things that have happened over the past 3 or 4 month period. And so by the time, I know we have a plan to have next steps about wildfire on the next meeting. So depending on, how we structure the due date of these articles, we could potentially do it just as a follow-up to that next meeting, maybe say around July 29th. As a due date or something like that, and then we can include that. I would definitely keep transportation and fire separate.
Well, you could. I'm good to go with either one, but my point is, in the area of transportation, the culminating event was the completion of the Connect the Coast side. In the case of wildfire, the culminating incident is the completion of the RCD scoping plan for El Granada, and both of those were now basically considered done. And so it's where are we going from there? And both of them, it sort of is a lead-in.
Trying to remember, I think we did include Connect the Coast side in the last newsletter, do we not?
The point is just saying, that's done. Where are we going from here? I know in the last meetings where we tried to bring that forward, we certainly didn't have enough background. And 2 activities are kicking off probably in August. So it's just 2. Anyway, that's the tack I'll take. We can talk it over, but you can assign to somebody else with something different. That's my interest.
Okay, let me hear what other people have to say. Greg?
I was going to mention, we had a lot of loose ends in transportation. Remember, we held that meeting and there were like 4 to 6 things going on. And as Len reminded me, we haven't heard what they decided to do with the traffic signs in Montero. So it would seem to me there's room for an update on transportation. Whether the things are done or not, though, we need to let people know what's coming. I don't know where the wireless transportation thing is going to go at the planning meeting that Harvey talked about that's been twice delayed. But there's going to be, I think, enough things to write about. And personally, I don't see a problem with writing about things that are coming up for comment. We know we're going to be getting documents for comment on the Moss Beach corridor, and I think it's fair game to tell the community those things are coming. What others think?
Yeah, I think it's fair to tell them that that's coming. Just remember, these are not opinion articles or speculation. These articles should be factual, and they can be forward-looking in terms of saying this is coming, but that's where we draw the line in terms of.
Well, I was going to volunteer to edit, but you might want to exclude me because I can't write without opinion.
But can you edit and take away people's opinion?
Sure. Well, you can recognize when opinion is expressed and eliminate it.
Yeah, I tend to do that.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Okay. Sign them up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it once. Sure.
Great. Thank you. Other volunteers for some of the things I mentioned or other ideas? We need more than 3 people on this.
I could do one on the aging presentation.
Okay. Yeah, that was great.
I think that's good.
So we've got lead, aging, something on wildfire, something on transportation. There's a Quarry Park master plan. I don't know. I don't really see much.
Well, there's the pump track.
The pump track. Yes, indeed.
That will be, I mean, the grand opening is this weekend, right? That'll be over by the time, well over by the time the newsletter comes out, but we could definitely have, an article about it.
Well, the opening of the pump track actually highlights an important aspect of Quarry Park, and that is an interest in having designated mountain bicycle type trails there. I know that's one of the things they're looking to do. And the turning the pump track itself on is a big part of sort of stepping in that direction.
Okay.
We also had presentations. The lead thing, I assume, is going to get wrapped in with the airport manager and the noise thing. But we also had election stuff, redistricting stuff. And then we had that fentanyl harm reduction presentation.
That was actually included in the last newsletter.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, the last newsletter had the lead issue, off-leash dog walking pilot program, the scoping project update, the traffic signs near Montera, and fentanyl. So why don't we do this? Why don't we have Len do a transportation article?
I think you got that backwards. He wants to do wildfire. I want to do transportation.
You want to do that? Well.
Oh, you want to switch? I don't care.
No, I'll do wildfire. You do transportation.
Okay, fine.
Okay. So Greg, transportation, Len, wildfire, Claire, aging. I can do one about the airport. And then does someone else want to write a brief article on the pump track? Or Len, did you want to take that one too?
I can take that.
Joe or Dan, maybe?
Yeah, anyone else like to be involved this time?
Could I ask you, Michelle, to send out an email to everybody after the meeting,
yes,
summarizing who's doing what?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
So Greg volunteered both to do an article and to be the editor, right?
Yes, which means someone else.
Wait till you see how I edit myself.
Right.
That's going to be fun.
No, if I'm the technical editor, I'll step in and edit your article.
Sounds good.
And then that should just about do it. So I'll send out a timeline as well, and we'll make the due date just after our next meeting. I can do it like the Sunday after our next meeting if everyone promises to be on time.
Okay.
Then I'll send it out for translation and get that back, and it usually takes about a week. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Next thing to decide, I think we will need a vote on this, is Mid-Penn, the open space people have invited us to participate in their 50th anniversary celebration, which is on Saturday, September 10th from 12 to 5 at the Johnston House in Half Moon Bay. I guess there'll be various types of hilarity going on, but we're invited to have a table or a booth with some sort of presentation or activity publicizing MCC. And I told them tentatively that we would do that, but it would require some effort on our part. And I wanted to get buy-in from the council before we actually confirm that.
I'm going to make a suggestion that it's important for us to get the word out that we need new council members. And I think it should be a requirement that any council member who does not stand for re-election has to man that booth.
That's a pretty sneaky way to man the booth.
I think I already volunteered because I'm going to be there anyway for the Half Moon Bay Association.
So
I missed it. What was the date?
I think we need a table or a tent or something, and we need some kind of catchy something to do there. So if we are going to do that, we need at least a few people that are willing to work on this.
So
I'm willing to work on it.
The problem I have about this is that MidPen does great work throughout its portion of the coastside and the county, but they specifically cannot do anything in the Midcoast in terms of project work. We have state parks, we have national parks, and we have our own, and they don't really get attention. If we could, in parallel to a celebration of MidPen, point out all the parks that are in the Midcoast, that would be a useful thing to do while supporting them as well. So that's the concern I've always had about MidPen.
We also get our logo on all of their publicity materials if we do this.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the Midcoast use the open space district parks. So, yeah,
absolutely. I'm not. We want them to use our parks too. So, anyway,
I think that's is a little bit off their intended topic, but I mean, we can certainly talk about it.
I volunteered to help with the booth and man it.
Okay, so we got 3 people that are willing to work on it.
Yeah. And Dan, do you still have that canopy? Could we borrow your canopy?
I have a canopy. It's not in the greatest condition. There's a couple minor problems with it, but I can go over them with you. It does work. It's old, but it does work. It's not ugly. It's just old.
Yeah. Well, certainly better than nothing, and I don't think we need to buy one as a council. So if we can borrow yours, that'd be great.
Sure.
So it sounds like we're willing to do this. Is there?
What was the date again?
What? It's the 10th of September. It's a Saturday.
Okay.
12 to 5.
Just going to say, I really like the idea of us doing more things like this. So, I'm not sure if I can be there that day, but I can help with any marketing materials or information that we can do in advance to help publicize it. Okay. And maybe we want to put a little thing in our newsletter that saying that we're going to be there.
You could write that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we better put in the newsletter. We want more members.
Yes.
That's a really good point.
Are we going to publish it before August 18th?
Yeah, we should.
Okay.
Who wants to write that?
I'll write it.
Thank you.
Somebody else wants to.
Okay. Is there a motion to get back to MidPen and tell them we will co-sponsor their event?
I'll make that motion.
Co-sponsor the event?
Mm-hmm. That's what they're calling it, is co-sponsoring.
Okay,
I'll second it.
Okay, so I moved and Greg seconded.
Can you call the roll, please, Lynn?
Will do. Greg?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Passes 7-0.
And I don't think working on this requires a limit of 3 people per Brown Act. I don't think this is more of a work activity.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we're going to have more than 3 people staffing the booth, though, we probably ought to declare it a special event.
Well, we could do that if we need to.
We co-sponsor.
We'll know better when we get closer.
Yeah. Okay, the last thing is a modification of our secretarial duties. I think that several of you have been talking among yourselves on this, and there's a proposal to have Len remain as secretary, but to have 2 assistant secretaries with Jill doing the minutes and Dan calling the roll and voting totals during the meetings. Len, do you want to say anything more about that?
Well, aside from that, this was kicked off when I was away for about a month, and Jill stepped in and did a very good job. In doing the secretary job, one of my concerns is one of its responsibilities is especially to attend to where we are in progressing on the priorities we established. And as I mentioned, it's my perspective that both in the wildfire and the transportation area, we're coming up with major things that will span more than 1 month just to happen. And so that's really supposed to fall to the secretary as well as the minutes itself, or this particular aspect of secretary. There's also a communication role, and that's largely filled by Dave right now, and I know others have been going to step in. But as far as priorities, it's sort of I see as a focused effort. So this would let me concentrate on that within both the minutes on the meeting and with Jill complementing that. So that's why I'm in favor of doing it. And I think having Dan work on the role is a useful adjunct or adjacent part of it. And then those 2 provide a sounding board for the minutes before we release them. I'm trying to work with the goal of posting these minutes once completed and reviewed as early as Tuesday of next week, just so that they can benefit people by quickly seeing the recount of what we did, but having it thoroughly vetted before we do it.
That raises an interesting point. You mentioned posting. Isn't it within the secretary's purview to do the posting on the website, or is that, how do we handle that? Who puts the agendas
You mean the
up?
actual posting onto the website?
Yes.
Well,
like posting
sort
the draft
of
minutes.
taken on that technical responsibility, and other people are doing it well, but that's sort of a separate issue, from my opinion.
Okay. Well,
it's not stated in the bylaws because all that came into existence well after the bylaws. And as far as I know, there was never any official policy on that. Generally, the secretary has done it, but not always.
Well, I'd like to thank Jill and Dan for stepping up and becoming assistant secretaries if we approve that. I like the fact that everybody's working together. Is there a motion to approve the appointment of Jill and Dan as assistant secretaries to do specifically Jill the minutes and Dan the calling of the roll?
So you're moving that, right, Claire?
I'm asking for a motion.
I'm willing to make that motion, but I want to make sure before we make the motion. So Jill, are you willing to continue doing the grunt work of the minutes from now to the end of the year? You're on mute.
I think basically I divided up the activity.
Yeah, but I want to hear it from Jill.
No, I understand. It's just the way you stated it.
Oh, sorry. The reason that I want to take over the minutes is I feel that it's bogging down Len, and Len he's such a great resource. I want him to be able to invest more time in things that really matter. And not that the minutes don't matter. It's just that it's something that I don't want to do them, but I can do them. So I'm going to do them just to free him up. And I would like Dan doing the meetings because he's got a knack for it. That's what we saw when Len was away. And that's another way to free up Len so he has more time to invest in other more important things.
Okay.
So yes.
And Dan, are you willing to do the roll calling and record the votes?
Yes, I'm happy to do that part. Yes.
Or actually not record the votes, announce the votes. Since that's part of the COVID requirements. Okay, great. So I will move that we appoint Jill Assistant Secretary to minutes and the calls and announce the votes. from now until the end of the year.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Jill? Okay, we'll do a vote. Greg?
Well, wait, was there any other discussion before we vote?
More discussion.
Any community discussion? Great, okay.
Okay, vote. Okay. Greg?
Aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jeff? Yes, myself, yes. Passes 7-0.
Thank you. Council activity.
Yeah, can I mention some stuff I'm involved in? And I don't know that you consider it council activity or not, but I think it's important and it could be causing trouble. So I think you all should be aware of it. You're probably aware back in December, we had a near fatal overflow at SAM. The sewer authority still has not dealt with it. I won't go into all the details, but I've been trying to get the parties involved in SAM to take action. I've even been asked, why are you doing this? Well, the answer is because nobody at SAM is doing it. And so we have a potentially serious issue at SAM. In addition, you may have read letters to the editor that I've put in the Pacifica Tribune and Half Moon Bay, criticizing the fiscal sustainability of both cities, which are projecting deficits. And you may be aware that I've come up with a methodology for evaluating the reserve deficits at public works agencies. It's all going to be controversial. Whether or not I'm exactly right on the dollar amount, there's still a lot of information to be gleaned from looking at the ranking. So, you know, even if I'm off by 50%, Pacifica is still terrible, et cetera. I just want to make you aware that the issue of fiscal sustainability in our public works and local cities is poor, if not terrible. And it's going to become a focal point, at least of mine personally, going forward. And I think it deserves the attention of every resident taxpayer, but it hasn't made an MCC agenda yet. Okay, and that'll be up to the group as to whether they want to speak on it, but I do think it's a serious issue. So that's part of my activity.
Question, Greg? So you talked about it, but are you planning to in some way bring it forward as an agenda item or just keep us updated as an activity?
Well, I'll defer to others on the council about what becomes an agenda item. I definitely am moving it forward. I've been in contact with the AICPA to get it published there. And as an accounting paper, I've been in touch with the American Water Works Association to get it published there. I've been in touch with a group called Strong Towns, which shares some of my thoughts to get it published in their organization. They've written a book about it. I think this is a serious matter along the lines of the unfunded pension liabilities, which required a change in accounting practices. So I'll just keep you updated, and whether you think it's a council activity issue or not, that will remain to be seen. It will probably hit the districts of GCSD and MWSD first, and SAM.
So I'm assuming the question then is up to Claire, and at this point she has yet to feel it merits coming on the agenda. Okay.
Right.
Dave?
Yeah, just a minor report. I attended the 6 p.m. session that the Open Space District had on the same issues they presented to us, multimodal access to Persimmon Creek Redwoods, and also the new Persimmon to the Sea Trail. It did not seem to be heavily attended. I obviously couldn't see participants, but from those who spoke in the breakout sessions, I'm guessing there were probably about 30 people attending. Hopefully more attended at 7 p.m. But there were a lot of good comments, and the videos of that will be available. I've not yet watched the 7 p.m. video to know what happened there, but I would suggest that people on the council that are interested in that issue watch. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I had my hand up, Claire.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for transportation items, the draft environmental document for the rehabilitation project is scheduled to be released in August. It's a 30-day comment period, so it will stretch on. And to have enough in it, we need to decide how we want to discuss it in an agenda item or beyond that. The contract for basically what we refer to as a Moss Beach corridor should be let in August as well, or at least identified it. And our participation there is important, but not well spelled out. We've been informed that Caltrans will be bringing back really for them, it's the overall transportation operations technology, one element of which is the variable message sign. So I believe they're going back on that. And in a verbal communication with DPW, they found that the stop signs in Montero did not pass the warrants, but they're looking at other ways in which they can rationalize putting in stop signs.
Okay. All right. In terms of the future agendas, the seamless transportation people are scheduled. Go ahead.
Quick question on Len's report.
Yeah.
So on the Montero stop signs, did the action get reported back to the people who requested it?
No, they're not ready to do that. The technical review is forwarded to the director, and they're continuing to discuss it further before they release a response.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Next meeting, the seamless transportation project is on the agenda, and an item that I believe Len and Greg are working on about fire will be on the agenda.
Michelle's going to work on that too.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, terrific.
Oh, and just a note on that, I had spoken to Kellex earlier today, just saying that I think, you know, it would be really helpful if we had an opportunity to have her come and speak during that item. I hadn't talked to Greg or Len about that, but she did say that she was available that date, and she's put it on her calendar if we'd like to have her.
That might be enough for one meeting, between the transportation and your item. We'll see. There's something about water conservation that I'm trying to get on. There's the things that Glenn just talked about. We've got queued up. Any other ideas that people want to add to the list?
Yeah, I'd really like to do an item on SMC alerts.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't need to be the next meeting. It can be maybe sometime in August if we have room for it. But I'd like, I'll try to get introduced to the person that's going to be in charge of that going forward.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
No.
Okay. Michelle moved. Who seconded?
Second.
Bill?
Who did? Jill?
Dan.
Dan. Okay. Going down. Jill?
I read her lips.
Yes.
Jill? Dan?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Me, yes. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thanks all.
Good night.
It's after midnight.